Chapter 559, Magic Card Elf Girl, Second Update. Lucian turned the pages of the grimoire Ray had entrusted to him, pausing over the spread of spell cards nestled within. At first glance, they resembled Clow cards, but these were new prototypes, first-generation copies he had developed himself. He didn't regard them as the final form. They were merely a step toward the deck he truly desired. His aim in crafting them was pragmatic, to strengthen his own combat capabilities. Centuries ago, Clow Reed had designed his cards for an entirely different purpose. He'd made them as playthings for his daughter. For Reed himself, there was little point in channeling magic through paper when he could summon it directly from his vast reserves. In the same way, Elio Hiragisawa, Reed's chosen heir, never bothered with cards at all. Elio wove spells straight from his fingertips, bypassing any physical medium. By contrast, Sakura Kinomoto had needed the cards. Without them, her raw talent wasn't enough to control advanced magic, especially not spells that twisted time or toyed with reality. The cards gave her a reliable framework. She pointed, invoked the incantation, and the magic obeyed. Lucian found himself in Sakura's old shoes. Though gifted, he still stumbled when he tried to cast powerful incantations without assistance. Every time he summoned a card, precious seconds slipped away as he located the right image, traced its symbol, and felt its energy ignite. In a tight fight, those moments could mean the difference between victory and defeat. Yet Lucian refused to be held back. He treated each prototype as a lesson, analyzing its shape, weight, and magical resonance. He knew the final deck would have to fuse Reed's elegance with Elio's raw potency, an instrument as immediate as direct casting, yet as versatile as the original Clow cards. Until then, he would practice relentlessly, refining both card and caster in himself, so that one day he might weave magic with the same effortless grace as the master who came before him. Lucian flipped the Thunder card between his fingers, studying its crackling sigil. To unleash its power, he would have to draw the card from his deck, recite the incantation precisely, and then release the stored lightning in a single, devastating volley. But why bother with this elaborate ritual when he could simply cast a thunder spell directly? The answer struck him like a bolt from the blue. The Thunder card's lightning was immensely stronger than anything he could summon unaided. That realization had set his current project into motion. He was determined to transform each magic card into a self-contained weapon, one that not only amplified the raw energy of its spell, but could also link with others to form complex, multi-card formations. Even more important, once a card's spirit materialized, it wouldn't vanish after a single skirmish. Instead, the spirit would continue to train itself, refining its combat techniques and deepening its arcane resonance, so that every subsequent manifestation was more powerful than the last. Lucian pictured the battlefield of the future. He'd scatter his deck across the field, take cover, and let the autonomous card spirits tear through his enemies without further effort on his part. Unlike the original Clow cards, which were limited in scope, this new generation contained dozens of magical disciplines, everything from explosive firestorms to phantom barriers. In most hands, such a collection would be dangerously unpredictable. In Lucian's hands, it would be the cornerstone of his rise to power. Lucian's voice rang out, firm and commanding. "George Card, hidden wellspring of light, reveal your true power. By the bond we share, I command you, break your seal." He let a drop of his blood fall onto the ancient spellbook and intoned the binding words George had inscribed within its pages. In an instant, the seal shattered. Radiant energy swirled around him, crowning Lucian as a George Card magician and granting him mastery over all 108 of the light cards. Wings of shimmering light unfurled behind him as he swept the book into both hands and surged toward the battlefield where Ancalagon, the black-scaled worm, loomed overhead. Lucian raised his voice. "Fairy's glory." A blinding column of pure radiance shot down from the sky, striking Ancalagon squarely across its massive flank. The dragon reared in pain, unleashing a bone-rattling roar. Seizing the opportunity, Galadriel and her two comrades urged their stone dragon mount forward, their weapons flashing in unison as they carved into the summoned beast's armored hide. Ancalagon thrashed, but Lucian was already rifling through his deck. Celestial magic, starfall of the gods. With a deafening crash, a flaming meteor plummeted from the heavens, slamming into the ground at the worm's feet and sending tremors rippling across the field. Without hesitation, Lucian unleashed card after card, ice-shaping magic. A whirlwind of frost encrusted the dragon's wings, slowing its movements. Thunder. A jagged bolt seared its scales, crackling with raw power. Water. A rushing torrent buffeted its chest like the heart of a storm. Illusion. An ethereal doppelganger flickered beside the beast, confounding its senses. Sleep. A pale mist drifted into its nostrils, weighing upon its mind. Each spell further restrained Ancalagon's fearsome might. Above the chaos, Lucian's wings glowed brighter with every card played, while Galadriel and her allies maintained their relentless assault from atop the stone dragon. Together, they hammered away at the ancient worm's resolve, determined to shatter its fury before it could strike back. Ancalagon finally faltered. One of his great wings hung limply, shattered by elven steel, and he crashed to the earth with a thunderous impact. Dozens of elven warriors swarmed over him, beating him down until, even for a dragon, he was as vulnerable and broken as the rest. The difference in power was all too clear. Lucian watched from the edge of the fray, frowning. His magical cards could still unleash respectable damage, but against a foe like Ancalagon, they were little more than toys. Without them, his own arcane might, what he called the glory of the fairies, was far more potent. If he focused every ounce of his strength into a single spell, he could have brought down the dragon with one blow. The cards, this first generation of experiments, simply couldn't keep up. He would need to spend months, years, refining his craft before they were more than curiosities. At his level, forging artifacts to boost that power was no simple feat. The wands that once magnified his magic 10 or 20-fold now lay inert in his hands, their enchantments dwarfed by his growing strength. No! Ancalagon's roar cut through the clamor as the dragon struggled beneath the weight of Lucian's suppressive wards. At the same time, the stone dragon knights closed in. The allied armies of the three tribes tightened their ring, and Fingon, the elves' greatest champion, pressed forward in a personal assault. Trapped on all sides, the mighty dragon's strength ebbed away, and even his defiant spirit began to waver beneath the unrelenting onslaught. At last, Ancalagon let out a final, unwilling roar and collapsed, grievously wounded and utterly powerless. Fingon raised his blade to sever its head, but before the sword could fall, Lucian strode forward and caught the hilt. "Hold on," Lucian commanded. "Don't kill it. I still have use for this dragon." Fingon blinked. "You'd spare a creature that nearly decimated our ranks?" "I would," Lucian replied without hesitation. "Consuming Ancalagon will yield more power than devouring a dozen ordinary dragons. Its raw strength rivals the black dragon of fairy tale, though it lacks that dragon's magic-nullifying aura." Reluctantly, Fingon lowered his sword and stepped back. Though he was commander of the three tribes' army, he understood that their true advantage lay in the magic Lucian had taught them. It was Lucian's arcane academy that transformed tribal warriors into formidable battle mages. Without his guidance, the tribes would have been slaughtered by Ancalagon's forces, just as the elves of Himlin once were. In that moment, it was clear that Lucian's influence outshone any battlefield rank. Ere this day had ended, he had once again proven why his word carried the weight of a king's decree. Lucian's renown preceded him on every battlefield, and none more so than this one. Not only did rank-and-file soldiers tremble at his presence, but even his father, High King Fingolfin, greeted him with a respect rarely shown between monarch and son. As the king himself admitted, if Morgoth were ever to be utterly defeated, Lucian would deserve at least half the credit, perhaps even more. Whispers ran through the camps that he must be a Valar in human guise, sent from Valinor to tip the scales. Yet none who had ever known even a single Valar could match the name Lucian to any being of light. Now, as the roar of battle swelled around them, Lucian strode to the forefront, directly beneath the vast, shadow-wreathed form of Ancalagon the Black. The dragon's wings blotted out the sky, its maw spilled flame that turned shields to molten metal. Lucian raised a single hand, his voice a calm whisper that carried across the field. "Collect." Ancalagon's scream cleaved the air, half agony, half rage, and then, as though the very fabric of reality had been rent, the great worm vanished. In his place hovered nothing but a dark ripple that Lucian had drawn into his own secret realm, a pocket of stillness no enemy could ever breach. "Armies of the North, forward," came Fingolfin's clarion command. "3 legions, wheel to the rear of Gothmog's host. Charge!" At once the line surged. Drums thundered, horns blared, and thousands of swords and spears swept around the flank of the Balrogs and their orc allies. Their objective, the beleaguered fortress of Himring, where the city's lord and 5 elven princes, among them Maedhros and Maglor, had fought back-to-back atop the palace battlements. Inside Himring's walls, hope flared when the first horn blasts echoed against stone. The elves and men rallied, beating down their foes as reinforcements broke the siege. In the molten gloom beyond the inner courtyard, King Gothmog himself turned at the distant echo of collapsing armor. His horned head swiveled, his red eyes widened. "And Calagon, fallen so swiftly?" he bellowed, heat waves rippling from his form. "This cannot be." But it was. As Fingolfin's 3 armies crashed into the Balrog legions, the last vestiges of the Dark Lord's siege shattered. Lucian stood at the very heart of the victory, wind whipping his cloak, eyes blazing with quiet triumph. Around him, freed soldiers and princes alike raised their blades in salute. The downfall of one dread creature had turned the battle, yet all knew this was but the opening blow in the war to come. Still, in that fierce moment, the armies of light pressed on, and even a Balrog king dared not stand against them. Is Lucian really that powerful? He'd always assumed Ank'Haragang's dragon legions would dominate the skies and easily neutralize the 3 tribes' alliance. Even if the coalition enlisted Lucian, a human renowned for his extraordinary abilities, it would only serve to bog them down, preventing any relief for Himlin's elves. His plan was simple: crush the elves of Himlin, then wheel the army back in concert with the dragons to strike the 3 tribes in a single, overwhelming assault. With their western defenses shattered, Middle-earth would fall entirely under his rule. But in barely the blink of an eye, everything collapsed. Ank'Haragang and its mighty draconic host lay in ruins, and the 3 tribes were already maneuvering to strike him from the rear. Chapter 560, Sailing for Nathan Island, Update 1. Fall back. Abandon the palace and withdraw at once. Seeing Maedhros at the end of his endurance, Gothmog called off his assault and hastily marshaled the Balrog Legion alongside the Orcish host to confront the 3 tribes' coalition head-on. "How many of them are there?" he snarled, astonished at the sheer size of their forces. He'd expected that once Ank'Haragang and the dragon contingent were routed, the coalition would be severely depleted, but to his shock, they'd suffered virtually no losses. This miraculous resilience was entirely down to Lucian's relentless healing magic. Any fighter who had fallen but still drew breath a moment ago was back on their feet almost immediately. The coalition's casualty count was effectively 0. "Shoot!" Fingon's voice cut through the din, and a storm of arrow shafts imbued with radiant light streaked skyward. In an instant, dozens of orcs under Gothmog's command collapsed, their bodies seared by the sunlight magic. The elves' enchanted bows might have little effect on dragons, but against orcs, who loathed sunlight magic, each arrow was deadly. A single strike meant instant death or grievous injury. Gothmog stared in disbelief as wave after wave of elven arrows raked his orc ranks. He remembered that, during their last assault on the 3 tribes' defenses, their bows had seemed formidable, but never like this. If the onslaught continued, his warriors would be slaughtered before they even closed to hand-to-hand combat. "Deploy the Fire Demon Legion," he roared. From the rear came a thunderous roar. Over 10 meters tall, the Balrogs surged forward in a wall of flame, determined to shield the orcs from the lethal arrows and clear the way for a counterstrike. But no sooner had they advanced than the dwarven war cannons opened fire. Each shell was magically conditioned into solid ice, bursting on impact with bone-shaking force. The demons let out anguished screams as they were driven back, their infernal fire sputtering in the freezing blast. In that moment, Gothmog understood why Lord Ank'Hara's dragon host had been routed so swiftly only days before. He ground his tusks in frustration and raised his voice once more. "Retreat to the Maedhros line. Now!" Under the storm of elven fire, the orcs fell back in disorder. Even the mighty fire demons could not stem the tide. Gothmog watched his legions withdraw across the blood-stained field, every step a reminder of their narrow escape. The three tribes' alliance had claimed victory today, and unless he found a way to turn the tide, the Orcish people might never recover. Lucian watched with a grim admiration as Gothmog sprang into retreat. The Lord of Balrogs was every bit as cunning as the legend said, but today he would not escape. Lucian had foreseen this very maneuver and tasked Fingon with a counterstrike. Morgoth's pride would be shattered this day. Gothmog and his orcs would be cut down here on the field. With a thunderous crack, a beam of brilliant light descended upon the fleeing ranks, incinerating countless orcs in an instant. At the same moment, squadrons of stone dragon knights plummeted from the sky, their obsidian wings unfolding as they formed a sweeping crescent that sealed off every route of escape. This masterstroke was Lucian's doing. After the defeat of Ancalagon, he'd reminded Fingon to trap Gothmog before he could retreat. "Gothmog," Lucian called out, his voice carrying over the clash of steel, "for my fallen brothers, there will be no mercy." High above, on the walls of Himring, Madros stood firm beside his only surviving brother, Maglor, and 100 weary but undaunted elven warriors. With a single resounding war cry, they charged to complete the pincer attack. Surrounded on all sides, between dragon-forged lances and elven blades, Gothmog's forces shattered. In a final storm of flame and steel, the Balrog Lord was struck down. His death echoed like rolling thunder across the plain, a victory that would strike Morgoth's heart and tip the balance of the coming war. "You're not going to move a finger, Morgoth? Coward!" Lucian's mocking words rang through the obsidian corridors as he wove his sorcery. Around him lay the drained forms of fallen Balrogs, whose souls he quietly bound to his will. Before this stronghold, 3 armies had converged: Gothmog's brood of Balrogs, a host of orcs, and a third mysterious force, trapping Morgoth's last real champions in a death trap. Lucian had expected Morgoth himself to storm the breach in a desperate bid to save them, but the Dark Lord did nothing. High in Angband's black towers, Morgoth brooded over his map-strewn war room. This fortress of iron and fire was his heart, its walls impervious, its forges eternal. If he left, he would be vulnerable. Even the Valar would pay dearly to breach Angband's defenses. If he marched out unprepared, he risked everything. Better that Gothmog, Sauron, Glorring, every one of his greatest lieutenants, should perish than see the crown of Angband undone. "I will not abandon my stronghold," Morgoth whispered, voice cold as brimstone. "Let them break themselves upon these gates. Time is on my side." He leaned forward, fingertips brushing the world's dark destiny. "One day, when my power courses through every root and stone of Middle-earth, not even Eru can unmake my reign." Outside the walls, Lucian smiled. The Dark Lord's caution was his ally. The war for Middle-earth had just begun, and in patience, Morgoth would prove the gravest coward of all. "I'm not entirely sure of my path yet," Lucian muttered under his breath, eyes narrowing as he gazed at Angband below. "First, I'll absorb every spirit, master the 6-story immortal thief technique, even devour these dragons and fairy tales' famed black dragon. Only then will I return to settle matters with you." High above the spired rooftops of Himrin's elf city, Lucian stood silent, envisioning a world under his command. He exhaled slowly, snapped his eyes open, and in the next heartbeat, his form dissolved into a ripple of light. "It's time to head for Nason Island," he decided, voice echoing in the wind. "Ruan Feng, the very architect of the 6-story immortal thief, awaits there, along with Li Muxuan, who bartered Lu Jin for the Third Realm reverse life technique. But it's the island itself that truly fascinates me." Nason Island lay hidden in the Mediterranean's azure expanse, a modest landmass known to outsiders as the Island of Strangers. Legend claimed every child born there emerged marked by otherworldly power, heirs to arcane legacies reminiscent of the cultivation furnace and Master Xiong of the 24 heavenly passes. Their ancestors, it was said, had worshipped a forest god in Roman times, only to be cast out and exiled to this remote sanctuary. With a final glance back at Himrin's glittering towers, Lucian vanished toward the horizon, eager to unlock Nason's mysteries and claim his destiny. Lucian stood at the edge of a dense grove, staring up at the colossal trunk of the island's sacred tree. According to Kutong's intelligence reports, this ancient arboreal wonder was the source of Nason Island's most extraordinary power. Any child born here was born touched by the tree, destined to become one of the island's fabled aliens. But the tree's influence didn't stop at childbirth. From its gnarled roots to its highest canopy, it selected 9 mighty warriors, known simply as the Nason Guards. Each guard was chosen for unparalleled strength and absolute loyalty to Nason Island. When commissioned, they gained the ability to teleport anywhere on the island, vanishing and reappearing in the blink of an eye, channeling the sacred tree's energy to defend their home. Above them all sat King Nason himself. Empowered by the tree, he wielded dominion over the entire island. He could monitor every valley and shoreline, sense disturbances in an instant, and even amplify the guards' innate abilities whenever danger threatened. Of course, not everyone on Nason Island was born into this system. Hidden among the regular islanders were the so-called illegal households, criminal fugitives from every corner of the globe. Having nowhere else to turn after committing offenses abroad, they fled to Nason Island in search of sanctuary, hoping the sacred tree's magic would shield them from the world's long arm of justice. Lucian unfolded the dossier he'd just received. Names, arrival dates, factors of transformation, all traced back to this majestic tree. He closed his eyes, mindful of the silent power pulsing through the grove. Here, every leaf whispered ancient secrets, and every child's fate was written in the bark. And now Lucian himself had become part of that story. An outsider, bound by the same roots, the same magic, and the same unbreakable bond to Nason Island's most sacred guardian. Under Nason Island's ancient law, anyone who can reach its shores and willingly abandon their former identity becomes a protected islander, yet they may never leave. Long ago, a neighboring kingdom dispatched a great army to drive out these so-called illegal settlers. But ordinary soldiers stood no chance against the island's defenders, each of whom possessed otherworldly powers. Every expedition was routed. From that moment on, Nason Island was spoken of in hushed tones, a place beyond ordinary reach. What few outsiders realized, however, was that the true prize wasn't the refugees themselves, but the island's legendary sacred tree, source of Nason's mysterious power. Chapter 561, Hero Sean, Second Update. It's extraordinary, Lucian whispered, hovering high above Nason Island. Drawing on his vast mental energy, he cast his senses downward. The island felt like its own pocket dimension, brimming with raw, untapped power. At its heart stood the fabled sacred tree, its very presence radiating ancient ley lines. Lucian's eyes glinted with possibility. If he could decipher the tree's formation principles and learn how it manifested those unique abilities, he might finally accelerate the consolidation of his own small world, the private plane of existence he'd been painstakingly crafting. A sudden shift in his awareness pulled him from the tree. "They're coming," he murmured. On the horizon, dozens of warships were closing in, their guns trained on Nason Island's shores. Emblazoned on their hulls was the logo of the American Behemoth Corporation. Founded by a cabal of U.S. industrialists, Behemoth had built a reputation and considerable influence parallel to the Nautatong Corporation back home. Their signature research involved extracting alien biology and incubating it into potent genetic serums, turning ordinary humans into enhanced aliens under the guise of defense applications. Now a full fleet of Behemoth warships lay in wait, all aiming to seize the sacred tree's secrets and refine their experimental drugs. Lucian studied their formation, blockading every cove, every potential landing point. He straightened, resolve hardening in his chest. If these mercenaries reached the tree first, Nason Island's power would be lost to corporate greed, and his chance to perfect his small world would vanish. "Let's see how eager they are to steal what they don't understand," he said, summoning the first tendrils of his mental barrier around the island. The battle for Nason had begun. For years, Behemoth Corporation's 12th-generation gene drug claimed almost a 100% success rate in turning ordinary people into aliens. Lately, however, the latest batches have fallen far short, surrendering far fewer awakened, and when the process does succeed, death often follows almost immediately. By contrast, Nason Island remains the world's envy. Every child born on its shores naturally awakens as an alien, free of risk or side effects. This miracle has drawn the covetous eyes of governments and corporations alike, none more so than profit-hungry Behemoth. Normally, Nason's unique bioelectric field extends into the surrounding seas, repelling naval vessels and preventing large-scale incursions. A handful of highly trained aliens might slip through, but even they stand little chance against the island's native awakened. Everything changed, though, when Nason Island announced it would open its borders. Now, not only Behemoth, but rival corporations, foreign militaries, and fringe sects, each driven by lust for the island's legendary sacred tree or by old vendettas against its black-clad defenders, are converging on Nason's shores. Why unveil the island now? The answer lies in a mysterious ceremony soon to begin. Lucian stood at the shoreline of Nason Island, watching the morning mist curl away from the trees. Normally, the island's king is chosen by the will of the sacred tree, an ancient, living oracle whose golden branches point unerringly to the next ruler. But today, everything had changed. A challenger had broken one of the tree's golden branches, invoking the ancient right of succession. From the moment a branch is severed, the island's wards fall away, and anyone may come and go as they please until the contest is decided. For Lucian, that was an opportunity he could not ignore. He allowed himself a small, satisfied smile. Nason Island had long been coveted by powerful factions who lacked the means to take it by force. Its defenses were more mystical than martial, and in the days before firearms, masked alien warriors had stood little chance against its guardians. But now Lucian's own inventions had changed the rules. Hot weapons, advanced explosive devices, mechanized troops, introduce a now of them, and even Nason's fearsome protections would crumble. King Nason, bound by tradition and the sacred tree's decree, could never openly permit outsiders to study the island's secrets. And yet, with the challenge underway, even the king dared not interfere until the new monarch was chosen. By the time this trial was over, Lucian intended to have unlocked every mystery of the tree, then claim its power for himself. After all, what was more fitting for the soon-to-be creator god than mastering the very force that crowns a king? Silently, he slipped past the low, invisible barrier that had fallen with the broken branch. Ahead, the forest loomed, alive with the hum of unseen creatures. Somewhere within its depths stood the sacred tree, its remaining golden limbs gleaming in the dawn light. Lucian's heart quickened. This was more than a challenge for a throne. It was the first step toward forging a new world in his own image, and nothing would stop him from emerging victorious. Lucian hovered on the edge of the forest clearing, watching the clash unfold below. Stealing a little girl's sacred tree was about as petty as ripping a lollipop from a toddler's hand, and in his experience, nothing enraged an adult more. These Nason Island kings were, in truth, nothing more than teenage girls. He muttered the incantation under his breath, traced the golden arrow of his tracking spell to its target, and shot forward like an arrow himself. Below, 4 warriors were locked in fierce combat, divided into 2 opposing pairs. On one side stood the celebrated hero Sean, clad in a sleek battlesuit emblazoned with Behemoth Company's emblem, and at his flank his swift partner, Xiao Chong. Sean was famed as the sole survivor of Behemoth's risky SP-1 gene drug trials, a living exhibit of super strength, near invulnerability, and lightning-fast healing. His combat skills had earned him the public's adoration, but Lucian's sources warned that Sean was little more than an idealistic pawn in the corporation's grand games. Across from them, 2 figures fought back-to-back. One was unmistakably Ruan Feng, a wiry teenage mage whose determination burned in her eyes, fingertips crackling with emerald magic. Beside her moved a hulking ally in bone-white armor, shield slamming into Xiao Chong's flank with bone-rattling force. Lucian slowed to a hover amid the treetops, observing the ebb and flow of spellfire and steel. Sean lunged, fists glowing with kinetic force. Ruan Feng countered with a surge of wind magic that sent him skidding backward through the undergrowth. Beside Sean, Xiao Chong spun, a pair of razor-sharp tonfas whirling to deflect the armored warrior's assault. He could see it now. If Ruan Feng and her companion could hold out just a moment longer, they might drive Behemoth's champions back. But he also knew firsthand how dangerous Sean could be when fueled by righteous fury, and even more how ruthless the corporation behind him refused to remain defeated. "Time to decide," Lucian whispered. He flicked his wrist, ready to plunge into the fray, or to strike from the shadows if that served the plan better. The fate of Ruan Feng's sacred tree, and perhaps much more, hung in the balance. Lucian cut through the night sky, his form a dark silhouette against the glowing moon. Below him, the old master, China's finest, might have posed a challenge, but none of the 10 great masters could stand against this newly acquired, laboratory-bred alien. Off to one side, 2 more beings lingered, a hulking, reptilian mutant and a shadowy figure whose every movement whispered of ninja arts. All 3 were illegal occupants of the island, stolen specimens in a secret program known as Behemoth. Sean, the self-proclaimed strongest alien of Behemoth, had already dispatched the reptile with a single thunderous strike. The ninja, startled, melted into the darkness, claws scraping stone as he fled for his life. Lucian felt neither curiosity nor concern for these 4 combatants. He banked right and pushed forward, eager to delve deeper into the island's but just as he glided above them, Sean's voice split the still air. "So you've got allies too." In Sean's eyes, Lucian was no savior, just another interloper on the restricted island, harboring the same reckless claims of invasion. His calf muscles coiled, and in the next instant he rocketed upward like a guided missile. His fist whistled through the air toward Lucian's midsection. "Beat it!" Lucian twisted aside, catching Sean's punch on the side of his jaw. With a single, effortless backhand, he sent the would-be champion skidding across the rocky plateau. Sean, despite his well-trained body, hit the ground so hard he left cracks in the stone. Wiping blood from his lip, Sean staggered to his feet. He glared up at Lucian, tiny in the sky, yet impossibly formidable. To Lucian, this display was little more than an annoying fly buzzing around a roaring engine. With a sharp exhalation, Lucian dove away, vanishing into the island's misty interior, determined to uncover its deeper secrets before any of these trespassers, or the men who controlled them, could stop him. Xiao Chong's heart skipped a beat as he watched Sean hurled into the air by that single, thunderous slap, so forceful it carved a crater into the ground. He sprinted forward. "Sean!" he cried. "What kind of terrifying alien is on this island?" Sean hauled himself out of the rubble, spitting blood. Xiao Chong stared, dumbfounded. He knew Sean's reputation. Rockets and missiles barely fazed him, yet this one blow had left his face grotesquely swollen. "Thank goodness it was just a misunderstanding," Sean wheezed. Above them, the stranger, Lucian, lingered for a moment, then without another word soared into the sky and vanished. Realization dawned on Sean. He'd mistaken Lucian for one of the butcher's men. In truth, Lucian had been merely passing through. Xiao Chong offered him a shaky smile. "Sean, shall we press on?" Sean straightened. "Yes, my wounds heal fast. I'll be back on my feet in half an hour." With that, the 2 of them set off again across the scarred landscape. "We need to find Wang and stay close to him. Make sure no one can get to him," Sean said, eyes scanning the jungle edge. "Once the company's team lands on the island, we'll handle things diplomatically." He eased himself onto the ground, unzipped his backpack, and pulled out an energy bar. As he chewed, Sean's expression grew thoughtful. He had little love for the company's profit-obsessed executives, but he couldn't deny the good they'd done with their resources. If they took charge here, they'd finally be able to bring the illegal settlers to justice. And the islanders would have the chance to leave this place behind and build better lives in the wider world. Chapter Text, A Day Off. Lucian squared his shoulders and approached his supervisor's desk. "I'm really sorry," he said, voice tight. "Something's come up at home. I need to take the day off." His supervisor studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Understood. Take care of it, and let me know if you need anything." Relief washed over Lucian as he gathered his belongings. With one last nod of thanks, he stepped out of the office and headed into the cool morning air. End of chapter. Chapter 562, The Devil's Curse of the Transformed Heavens, Update 1. 17. What are you waiting for? After all these years, you're still the world's worst chess player. In the clearing before a cave deep in Nathan Island's forest, 17, a disheveled old man in a crumpled coat, grinned as he swept Old Wang's knight off the board. Checkmate. Old Wang, a bald, portly fellow with a permanent 5 o'clock shadow, stared at the wreck of his pieces and rubbed his chin. "Give me a minute, will you? I'm still thinking." 17 shrugged, produced a chocolate bar from his tunic, and tore it open. "Back from the market again, are you?" Old Wang sighed, his plump fingers hovering over the ruined formation. "I'm just stocking up on supplies. Why starve on this god-forsaken island? You taught me how to fish and forage. I can survive. All the more reason to get a change of scene. 17 interrupted, popping a square of chocolate into his mouth, and to enjoy a little sweetness while we're at it. Old Wong frowned, his eyes narrowing. You've only been here 3 years. You still don't grasp the dangers lurking in these woods. 17 waved a dismissive hand. Danger sharpens the senses. Now come on, let's move. We've wasted enough time. Grumbling, Old Wong gathered the scattered pieces. Together, they rose and stowed the chess set in 17's battered pack. The forest around them stirred with unseen life, and the cave's dark mouth yawned at their backs as they set off deeper into the island's shadowy heart. Chapter 8. The Summons. If you keep this up, something's bound to go wrong before long, Old Man 17 chided, leaning back in his wooden chair. Ruan Feng waved a dismissive hand and chuckled. 17, are you worrying about me now? There aren't many friends left who can still call me 17, the old man replied with a wry smile. You'd do well to master that trick I taught you, and live a few more years. Then we can go shopping together, without my joints creaking like an old gate. Their laughter drifted across the small clearing as they settled over the xiangqi board. Ruan Feng, the broad-shouldered bald thief, studied the black and red pieces. Across from him, the wiry Old Man 17 made a decisive move, capturing Ruan's general. The game ended with friendly teasing and another round of laughter. Without missing a beat, the two masters rose and faced each other in the center of the clearing. Golden sunlight slanted through the trees as they began to practice their shared secret. The 6 treasures immortal thief, one of the legendary 8 wonders of the alien world. 17's nimble fingers wove through the air, tracing invisible formations, while Ruan Feng's stout frame mirrored each motion, calling forth hidden energies. Suddenly, a hush fell over the woods. 8 figures in varied attire, robes, leather armor, tribal tattoos, emerged from the underbrush and stepped into the open. They formed a semicircle around the two masters, standing motionless and alert. One of them, a tall youth with silver-threaded hair, strode forward and called out in a clear, strong voice. Master Ruan Feng, we have come to escort you. Ruan Feng paused mid-gesture and blinked at the newcomer. Escort me? He repeated, raising his voice. My ears aren't what they used to be. What did you say? The silver-haired youth inclined his head respectfully. We bear a summons from the 8 wonders. You are requested back at headquarters immediately, Master Ruan. 17 stepped forward, squinting at the newcomers. Coding words and secret summons so soon, he muttered under his breath. Then, louder, well, don't just stand there. Speak plainly. The youth glanced at Ruan Feng, then back to 17. Forgive the formality, masters. The council insists on your presence. They say the balance of the world depends on your skill, and they won't take no for an answer. Ruan Feng exchanged a look with Old Man 17. With a slow nod, he placed a hand on his chess pieces. The game would wait. Duties, it seemed, could not. End of Chapter 8. Could you please repeat the name you just called me, young man? Lucian, who had paid the 8 interlopers no mind until now, froze the moment he heard them speak his true name. A chill of murderous intent swept through him. For years, haunted by past demons, he had never once used his real name, instead going by the alias 17. Not even the operatives on Nason Island had uncovered his origins. Yet these 8 had addressed him by name without hesitation. They had come fully prepared. Master Lucian, the tallest of the strangers, said, voice steady. Surely I'm not mistaken? Lucian advanced without a word. The man flicked on his protective ward, an eerie glow shimmering around him. But before it could fully form, Lucian struck. In one swift motion, half the man's neck vanished. The survivor's eyes widened in shock as he crumpled to the ground, extinguished in an instant. Rather than recoil, the remaining 7 merely exchanged impressed glances. Then, without hesitation, they unleashed their own powers. Each was a master of the otherworld, wielding a unique enchanted weapon and its accompanying ward. Crystals hummed, runes flared, and the air crackled with arcane energy as they converged on Lucian in a coordinated assault. Lucian's lips curled into a quiet smile. Let them come. He'd long ago learned to thrive in the heart of conflict, and he would not be taken by surprise again. Lucian pressed on despite the odds, but even his prodigious strength couldn't quickly finish the job. "Send a full report to His Majesty at once," he ordered. 2 Nason Island guards, assigned to keep watch on the bald, heavy-set stranger outside the cave, snapped to attention and activated their communicators. From the moment Lucian had set foot on Nason, the king had detected him. Yet King Nason, wary of Lucian's might, chose not to engage directly. Instead, he dispatched these sentinels to observe from a safe distance. In the forest clearing, the gulf between Lucian's power and that of his adversaries was plain to see. The alien who had been commanding malevolent spirits just after pulling his comrades free from a barrage of energy snarled at his companion, a tall creature wearing a peaked cap. At the command, the cap-clad alien sat cross-legged on the mossy ground and began to chant in a strange, resonant tone, "Namo Mara Tianzi." The incantation rippled through the trees like a living thing. Lucian's brow furrowed, recognition flashing in his eyes. "That's the Hehuazizai Tianmo spell my 4th brother used at the very start," he realized, and suddenly a wave of dizziness swept over him. The world seemed to tilt as if he'd been plunged into an illusion, his thoughts caught in a shadowy labyrinth. Taking advantage of the confusion, a cloaked figure brandishing a mystic blade lunged forward and drove the weapon straight into Ruanfeng's belly, siphoning in a surge of venomous qi. Ruanfeng gasped, blood bubbling at his lips. Yet before the poison could fully claim him, a sharp voice cut through the chaos from above. "Looks like someone beat me to it." With a rustle of robes, Lucian alighted in the center of the clearing, every muscle coiled and alert. He instantly recognized the half-dozen cultivators arrayed around Ruanfeng, elite masters sent by Qutong to capture the injured warrior. From the stolen memories Qutong had inadvertently shared, Lucian knew the grand design. Qutong coveted immortality and planned to brainwash Ruanfeng, exploiting his rare talents to further that ambition. One of the captors straightened, surprise flickering across his features. "It's you," he snarled, hand inching toward his weapon. Lucian's eyes narrowed. Though Ruanfeng was formidable, these men had come prepared for a deadly showdown, willing to sacrifice many for a single prize. But the newcomer standing before them was no ordinary opponent. Rumors had long whispered that Lucian's prowess surpassed even that of Qutong's old master. "Master Ruanfeng is under my protection," Ian declared, his voice calm but unyielding. "Tell your master to stay far away, or this neither of us walks out of here alive." He lifted a single hand in a commanding gesture. The would-be captors froze, dread seeping into their hearts, then fell back in rapid retreat, leaving Lucian to cradle the wounded Ruanfeng as the clearing settled into an uneasy hush. Tao Shanggong's features twitched, and he forced out the words in a clipped, urgent tone. "Master Lucian, there's no need for bloodshed. Hand over Master Ruanfeng to us, and I promise the President will reward you handsomely." Lucian's dark eyes narrowed. He stood perfectly still, as if weighing the man's offer against some unseen scale, then shook his head once. "Leave," he said, voice low and icy. He'd already stripped every secret from Qutong's mind. With nothing of value left to trade, Lucian saw no reason for courtesy. These men were no friends, only mercenary partners who'd turn on him the moment fortune shifted. If they came seeking profit now, he'd give them nothing but contempt. In an instant, Tao Shanggong's skin shifted to a molten gold sheen. With a roar that cracked the air, he lunged forward, moving faster than the eye could follow. "Namo the Demon King!" he bellowed, his voice echoing like thunder. Beside him, the duck-tongued sorcerer hissed the ancient syllables of the Hehuazizai Tianmo mantra, and the rest of the group swiftly joined in, abandoning all pretense of parley. They unleashed their combined magic in a single ferocious wave, an assault meant to overwhelm Lucian once and for all. Lucian watched them without flinching. The Hehuazizai Tianmo mantra, how quaint, he murmured, his tone almost amused. Without a second thought, he unleashed the full force of his own arcane power. A shockwave of energy erupted outward, slamming into the attackers and sending them sprawling like rag dolls. Their cries vanished beneath the roar of his unleashed might. When the dust settled, Lucian stood alone, unscathed and still radiating power. A faint smirk curved his lips as he turned away, leaving behind the aftermath of their futile resistance. Lucian watched the spell's tendrils fade and felt a spark of fascination. The so-called Hehuazizai Tianmo curse, when fueled by the peaked cap's power, could actually unmoor Ruanfeng's mind by several levels and drag him briefly into its illusory world. If someone of Lucian's own strength, armed with his formidable mental acuity, had cast it, the effect would have been far more devastating. In the blink of an eye, Lucian materialized beside the peaked cap and began probing its essence with his thoughts. He furrowed his brow. "It's useless," he said quietly. "This mission is going nowhere." Tao Shanggong and the others, still staggered by the force of Lucian's arrival, exchanged worried glances. The curse had failed to touch him. Their confidence evaporated. The plan was broken. Even the recoil from Lucian's attack had nearly overwhelmed them. Had they pressed their assault, they wouldn't have lasted a second. Chapter 563, Let You Eat Your Fill. Second update. Lucian raised a calm hand. "Since I'm in a good mood today, I'll give you one last chance. Leave, now." Not long ago, he had delved into his own soul and unlocked the secrets of the Heavenly Devil mantra. Normally, intruders who dared to barge in on him would have long ago met their end. But with this new power, Lucian felt a strange leniency stirring within him. The mantra's true strength lay not in crushing the serene and content, but in ensnaring those driven by greed and ambition. The more covetous a person's heart, the more vulnerable they were to its illusions and to Lucian's mercy, or wrath. One of the assailants, a bulky brute, hurled himself at Lucian with a roar and spat a torrent of acrid, acidic mucus straight at him. His comrades, sensing an opening, pressed forward with new hope. Lucian frowned. "You're looking for death, then? Fine by me." In an instant, his body crackled with limitless lightning. The corrosive slime hissed and vaporized before it could touch him. At the same time, bolts of electricity leapt from Lucian's frame, enveloping the attackers in a searing storm of light. Screams echoed through the valley as flesh and armor charred to coal. When the thunderclap faded, 6 of the 8 intruders lay motionless, blackened husks where once they strode confidently. Lucian's eyes glowed faintly as he surveyed the scene, the air still humming with residual power. He had spared them once. The dead would speak no more, and the living would think twice before testing the limits of his mercy again. Tao Shanggong, renowned throughout the Isles for his near-impenetrable defenses, held out for barely another heartbeat. His golden skin shattered under the storm's wrath, and he collapsed dead where he stood. Only one figure endured even a moment longer. Mouth smeared with foul mucus, the man seized Tao Shanggong's broken corpse, just as the next bolt of lightning struck. In a single, horrifying breath of qi, he devoured the body whole. The stolen life force mended his charred flesh in an instant, and he slipped beyond the storm's lethal radius. Lucian, newly freed from the illusion, summoned the 6th treasury immortal thief to rebuild his battered form and purge the toxins he'd absorbed. He stared after the fleeing silhouette in stunned disbelief. To him, this was the same man he'd long known as a freeloading glutton, happy to eat anyone's rations, but utterly lacking in martial strength. Fearing the man would starve on the deserted island, Lucian had once taught him the basics of the 6th treasury immortal thief, reasoning that at least it would keep him from dying of hunger. Yet now, watching him absorb Tao Shanggong's corpse and escape unscathed, Lucian realized he had gravely underestimated his former protege. Lucian froze as Lao Wang suddenly unleashed a surge of power nearly equal to his own. In that instant, it became terrifyingly clear. The elusive 6th storehouse immortal thief had brought his mastery to an extraordinary level. Even more unsettling, the thugs who had attacked Lucian weren't random cutthroats. They were in league with Lao Wang. And then, Lucian saw it. Lao Wang was eating human flesh. His every movement was so practiced, his face so utterly free of revulsion, that Lucian realized this was no desperate act of hunger, but a ritualistic habit. In under 3 years, he devoured enough victims to rival the strength Lucian himself had spent 70 years forging. 17, Wang Guoping drawled, using Lucian's secret code name. His grin was both triumphant and cold. "My true purpose in coming to this island was to befriend you, learn your weaknesses, and then feed on them. I even summoned those men to help." With that confession, all pretense fell away. Wang Guoping bowed his head and admitted plainly, "I never imagined he'd intervene and ruin my plans." "I'll eat him first," Lucian said with quiet certainty, "and then we can have a proper conversation." Ruanfeng froze. After 3 years stranded on this island, he'd learned Lucian's name, the infamous Sixth Treasury Immortal Thief, but he still had no real sense of the young man's strength. A moment ago, a bolt of lightning had nearly ended Lucian's life. Yet here he stood, utterly unbowed. Such relentless vitality was Lucian's greatest weapon. Even when forced into a fight of attrition, his regenerative powers would let him outlast any opponent. His plan was straightforward. One by one, he would absorb the life force of Wang Guoping's strongest enforcers. Only after he'd drained them would he turn his focus back to Ruan Feng. In the 3 years they'd coexisted, Lucian had catalogued every flaw in the Elder's character. His pride, his insecurities, the brittle core of his confidence. Violence wasn't necessary. A few well-placed words would be enough to shatter his will. Wang Guoping, panic flashing in his eyes, drew upon the Sixth Treasury Immortal Thief's unique qi. Black energy coalesced around his outstretched palms and surged toward Lucian in a rippling wave. Wherever that qi touched, flesh and bone crumbled into smoking ash, as though life itself were being erased. Ruan Feng's voice trembled with equal parts fury and fear. "Do you enjoy devouring life so much?" Lucian's lips curved into a cold, predatory smile. Above the smoldering ruins, his pale eyes glittered. The endgame had begun, and soon, Ruan Feng's resistance would be nothing but dust on the wind. "Then I'll let you feast as you wish." Facing the Sixth Repository Immortal Thief, Wang Guoping, who had been siphoning his life force, Lucian didn't flinch or struggle. Instead, he offered a serene smile and reached out, plunging his hand straight into Wang's qi space. In that instant, he poured the vast reserves of vitality within himself into the thief's energy field. "I've never tasted anything so exquisite." Wang Guoping gasped as he absorbed Lucian's life force. His eyes flared with ecstasy, as though he'd consumed an otherworldly delicacy that elevated his very soul. For a Sixth Repository Immortal Thief, the potency of harvested qi depends entirely on its source. Plants and flowers yield only meager strength. Beasts provide more, but the pure spirit of heaven and earth, and humans above all, confers the most profound power. Alien bodies, in particular, are said to be the richest delicacy, granting the greatest leap in cultivation. This hunger drives Wang's true purpose in the island's markets, not to barter for ordinary food, but to acquire living corpses. Nason Island itself is shaped by 3 great powers. First are the authentic Nason Islanders, whose millennium-old tradition reveres the sacred tree and upholds the king's rule. They employ 9 elite guards to maintain order and shield both mortals and deities alike. Second, the merchant guilds dominate trade in exotic goods and rare creatures. Third, clandestine sects of cultivators and assassins pull strings from the shadows, each vying for control of the island's vital qi currents. In this delicate web of alliances and rivalries, every encounter, like the one between Lucian and Wang Guoping, carries the weight of Nason Island's hidden intrigues. Lucian stood at the edge of the northern bazaar on Nathan Island, watching a riot of colors and voices ripple through the crowded stalls. This was the neutral zone, a gathering place for travelers, traders, and mercenaries of every stripe. Deep in the south lay Paradise, a lawless haven for criminals and exiles ruled by the alien warlord known only as Paradise. Between these two extremes lay the domain of the Nathan Guards, sworn protectors of the island under the watchful eye of the king. To cross their path in anger was to invite instant pursuit. The guards could teleport anywhere at will, and the king monitored every corner of the island. Paradise's underworld fighters were notoriously powerful, and at their head stood Dao Diao, a warrior whose strength was said to border on the supernatural. Even now, with Lucian's newfound abilities, he knew he would be outmatched in a straight fight. So, for the last 3 years, he'd confined himself to the bazaar, hunting weaker aliens, draining them of vitality to fuel his growth in secret. He had become a ghost among the stalls, one moment a passing stranger, the next an unseen predator. Night after night, Lucian devoured his prey's life force, each victim's energy blending with his own until his veins thrummed with supercharged power. "So sweet," he murmured, eyes alight. "I crave more." His pulse quickened as he absorbed another alien's final spark. A warm surge of vitality flooded through him, lifting his spirits and sharpening his senses. Soon, he vowed, he would dare to challenge the mightiest, Dao Diao himself. But first, he would master this intoxicating strength, honing it to a razor's edge in the shadowed alleys of Paradise's northern bazaar. Wang Guoping knelt before Lucian, his eyes bloodshot, every breath a ragged gasp as he ravenously siphoned the young man's life essence. In theory, Ku Tong's Shuangquan hand should have kept his mind clear, kept him in control. Yet Lucian's vitality was so potent, so irresistibly delicious, that every safeguard shattered the moment he tasted it. The side effects of the Sixth Treasury Immortal Thief overwhelmed Shuangquan Hand's calming power. At first, Wang tried to regulate the technique, to slowly digest the stolen energy. But the torrent of life force was beyond anything he'd ever handled. His belly swelled grotesquely, veins snaking across his skin like living lightning. His reason screamed at him to stop, but an inhuman hunger drove him on. And Lucian did not relent, willfully pouring every last drop of his essence into the technique. A strangled wail tore from Wang's lips. His body distended until sinew and flesh began to tear under relentless pressure. Then, with a deafening boom, he exploded. The shock wave slammed into Ruan Feng, who'd been standing just outside the blast radius. He was knocked off his feet and thrown against the cavern wall, dust and debris swirling through the air. When he staggered upright, heart pounding, all that remained of Wang Guoping was a smoldering crater in the stone floor, and the eerie calm of Lucian, still standing at its edge, untouched. Chapter 564. I Want to See Your King. First update. Ruanfeng stared in disbelief at Lucian as flickers of raw life energy danced across his palms. Only moments ago, Lucian had countered Wang Guoping's thunderstrike without so much as a bruise. The display of vitality was beyond comprehension, and the strength behind it even more so. Ruanfeng had witnessed Zhang Huayi unleashing his absolute best, but this was on an entirely different level. Only the legendary Taoist priest of Dragon Tiger Mountain was rumored to rival such power, and even that tale now seemed faint. Stepping forward, Lucian brushed imaginary dust from his cloak and spoke with calm assurance. Master Ruanfeng, those ants you mentioned are dealt with. Now that they're out of the way, let's discuss what you wanted. Ruanfeng swallowed hard, forcing a courteous bow. Thank you for coming to my aid. I would have been overwhelmed without you, though I doubt I would have been defeated outright. Still, it would not have been easy. He paused, steadying his voice. What do you require of me in return? Lucian's gaze was unwavering. I have a single request, and it concerns your king. But first, I need your full cooperation. A hush fell over the clearing as Ruanfeng nodded. Whatever this stranger asked, he would deliver, if only to learn more about the man who wielded such astonishing power. Lucian settled onto a low rock, unfazed by Ruanfeng's sharp gaze as moonlight danced across the deserted shore. Master Ruanfeng, he began, voice calm, I'll be direct. I came to this island today to propose an exchange. Ruanfeng crossed his arms, narrowing his eyes. Go on. Lucian inclined his head. I know the source of your torment, the emptiness eating at your heart, and that dreadful struggle between devouring your victims or sparing them. I can help you banish that void and break free from this inner curse. A flicker of hope and doubt crossed Ruanfeng's features. And what do you ask in return? Lucian's lips curved into a faint smile. Only your promise to teach me the Sixth Treasury Immortal Thief technique. Ruanfeng exhaled slowly, weighing the offer. So you covet my secret art. Even if I agreed, I can't promise it will bring you anything but trouble. He paused, recalling how Lucian's insight had already eased his own anguish. Finally, Ruanfeng nodded. Very well. I will teach you the Sixth Treasury Immortal Thief. But betray our deal, and you'll regret it. Lucian had felt firsthand the debilitating side effects of the Sixth Storage Immortal Thief. He was convinced that anyone who embarked on its path without proper guidance was courting disaster. You still don't trust me? He murmured. Very well. Let me fix this for you first. In a flash, Lucian appeared at Ruanfeng's side. He placed one hand gently on Ruanfeng's shoulder, then drew on the power of his azure dual-hand technique. A soft blue light spread from his palm, seeping into Ruanfeng's ether and beginning to soothe the turmoil within. The Sixth Storage Immortal Thief is lauded as the ultimate method of physical refinement, yet it demands a cost that few acknowledge. Strengthening the body without tending to the mind inevitably widens the gap between flesh and spirit. As the body grows more powerful, the spirit struggles to keep pace, and an unbalanced cultivation can shatter one's psyche. With the Azure Dual Hand technique, however, Lucian could subtly recalibrate Ruan Feng's spirit. The cerulean energy adjusted the frequency of his soul, easing the internal conflict and guiding him back toward harmony. Lucian had learned this approach from Ku Tong, the enigmatic master who wandered foreign worlds seeking out those broken by despair. Under Ku Tong's gentle ministrations, countless souls found peace and, without realizing it, pledged undying loyalty to their benefactor. Now Lucian followed in his teacher's footsteps, healing hearts, restoring balance, and quietly winning allies for the challenges yet to come. Lucian didn't need followers. His sole aim was to help Ruan Feng heal his psyche, leaving behind no subtle mental traces. "All right," he said, releasing his hand. He studied Ruan Feng carefully. The change in the man's demeanor was astonishing. Before, Ruan Feng had carried himself like an ascetic monk, perpetually battling the hunger clawing at his mind, his brow never fully relaxing. Now, however, his tense features had softened, the corners of his mouth curling into a gentle, almost serene smile. He looked less like a wrathful Vajra and more like the Maitreya Buddha. Ruan Feng blinked. "If I'm not mistaken, you just used the twin fist technique. Could it be?" Lucian shook his head. "No, I've known who you were for some time. The twin fist technique itself I acquired from Ku Tong, Duan Muying's daughter, and the mastermind behind the attempt to abduct you. And that wasn't the only skill I traded for. I also secured the origin of Qi, spirit binding, and command dispersion, the celestial path, the Fengho Chiman, and the divine gene 8 lotus, all of them obtained through similar exchanges." With a swift motion, Lucian demonstrated each of the 6 arcane techniques in turn. Ruan Feng watched, eyes widening in astonishment, as Lucian effortlessly wove through their subtle energies and concealed power. This display was proof enough. Lucian's mastery was real, and every technique in his possession had been earned rather than stolen. Lucian could hardly believe it. Someone had actually mastered all 6 strange skills, then added his own, bringing the total to 7. No wonder he wielded such fearsome power at so young an age. His innate talent was simply off the charts. Even fourth brother Wu Gensheng seemed to trail far behind. "I accept your terms," Lucian said, meeting Ruan Feng's gaze with steady calm. "You've helped me when I was stuck. Now teach me the 6th treasury immortal thief." Ruan Feng nodded and nicked his finger with a sliver of jade. A single drop of blood welled on his palm. "To internalize the immortal thief technique, you must absorb the master's life essence first. Only then can you begin to practice its subtle forms." Lucian waved him off. No need for ceremony. He reached out, placed his hand against Ruan Feng's forehead, and closed his eyes. In an instant, his mind dove into the living currents of the 6th treasury immortal thief, tracing every channel, every hidden route of Qi, as if reading the technique directly from Ruan Feng's memory. After all, the 8 wonders were never simple skills to be learned by rote. Each required its own means of transmission. The origin of Qi body was gifted through spiritual communion, the twin hands technique was encoded in genetic inheritance, and the Fengho Chiman formation relied on an exact diagram. Now, seamlessly and silently, the secret pathways of the immortal thief technique were unfolding in Lucian's consciousness, ready for him to master. Lucian didn't need to struggle like an ordinary cultivator would. Having already mastered the heavenly magics, forged the prototype of his own microcosm, and inherited the legacy of Xiang Genren, all he had to do was trace the energy pathways of the new skill in his mind. He withdrew his hand and closed his eyes. Guided by the flowchart he had deduced, Lucian redirected the Qi in his body to follow the pattern of the 6th treasure immortal thief, restructuring the channels through his 6 organs in a matter of heartbeats. Then he opened his eyes, stretched out his palm, and pressed it gently against the sapling beside him. His refined Qi poured into the tree, coalescing around its trunk and roots. Within seconds, every drop of vitality was drawn out. The leaves wilted, the bark pale. "Fascinating," Lucian murmured. The effect was eerily akin to the Wood Dragon Slayer's life-devouring aura. His affinity with the Wood Dragon Slayer lineage, an ability that let him restore both vitality and magical power by feeding on plant life, had made learning the 6th treasure immortal thief almost effortless. The 2 arts shared the same fundamental principle, and Lucian realized he could fuse the wood dragon's devouring essence with the immortal thief's techniques to magnify its potency even further. Ruan Feng watched in awe as Lucian mastered the six storehouse immortal thief technique in mere minutes. The wood dragon's skill could only siphon a tree's vitality to temporarily bolster one's magic. It couldn't offer lasting physical strength. By contrast, the six storehouse immortal thief could consume the life force of any living thing, channeling that energy to heal injuries and steadily reinforce the body itself. He picked it up so fast, it's more than genius. There really are extraordinary people in this world, Ruan Feng murmured to himself, unable to hide his amazement. Lucian merely nodded, a faint smile on his lips. All right, our arrangement is complete. Until next time. With that, he disappeared in a flash of light. Moments later, he reappeared beside the two Nasan Island guards stationed near Ruan Feng. Greetings, Lucian said calmly. Please inform Lord Wang Tong that I wish to see him. Chapter 5 and 65, Complex, Nathan Island. Second update. Lucian's sudden arrival left the two ordinary Nathan guards dumbfounded. They exchanged a panicked glance before fumbling for their communicators. Though Lucian stood before them with an easy, almost gentle smile, the memory of his recent display of power still made their hands tremble. After a few halting breaths, one guard steadied himself and spoke into his device. Sir, we've reported the incident and Lord Elijah's orders. He'll inform King Nathan immediately and relay their response as soon as possible. Very well, Lucian replied, nodding once. He watched the guards fall quiet, their fear barely contained beneath forced composure. In the kingdom of Nathan Island, only King Nathan himself, and the legendary 9 great guards, rivaled Lucian's reputation. Within the island palace, exceptionally gifted youths were handpicked by the elders, rigorously trained, and continuously pushed to surpass their limits. Yet even here, Lucian's presence cast a palpable hush over the court. When one of the 9 Nathan guards falls in battle, the sacred tree itself selects a new child to take his place. Thus the cycle endures. Among the current guards is Elijah, who spends most of his time roaming the length and breadth of Nathan Island rather than standing sentinel at the palace gates. Because Qutong once traveled abroad with Elijah, the court has gleaned what little it knows about him from Qutong's memories. In the hushed grandeur of the palace throne room, King Nathan appeared before his assembled council. A guard in gleaming armor stepped forward. Your Majesty, any word? Has he given his answer? The king shook his head, eyes steeled. Not exactly. He insists on fighting his own battles first. If he stands on his own, it will ease some of our burden. At that moment, a ceremonial golden branch, symbol of the throne's succession, was struck free, and its fall echoed through the chamber. The breaking of the branch signaled that the island's protective wards must be lifted, opening Nathan Island once more to the outside world. King Nathan knew all too well what that meant. The Behemoth Company, long coveting the sacred tree and the power it grants, would seize any opportunity to descend upon the island. Only when Nathan Island's mists part and its warships can approach is it truly vulnerable, and the moment for Behemoth to strike may be at hand. Lucian watched the commotion from the shoreline, noting that only a handful of elite operatives could actually set foot on Nathan Island. Everyone else had been turned away. But now that the island's borders were officially open, he knew the Behemoth Corporation would soon mount a full-scale assault. Their ranks boasted genetically enhanced soldiers backed by the latest military hardware. Lucian didn't believe the local defenders could hold out until the succession ceremony was complete. If Nathan Island fell, everything they'd fought for would vanish. He had no choice but to throw himself into the fray and see whether he could tip the balance in the defenders' favor. Under the pretense of brokering supply deals, he'd extended invitations to every major power on the planet, and then leaked word that Nathan Island was once again welcoming visitors. It was a calculated risk. Once the rumor reached the right ears, every faction with a bone to pick, including those long at odds with the island's secretive clans, would be scrambling to secure a foothold. True to Lucian's expectations, forces from around the globe began plotting landings of their own. Even the Behemoth Corporation, which had gone to great lengths to block rival contingents from reaching the sacred tree at Nathan's heart, could not stamp out every attempt. Through his own network of scouts, Lucian had already detected dozens of unfamiliar vessels slipping in under cover of darkness. Tonight, he thought, the real battle would begin. If these disparate armies arrived in droves, the defenders of Nason Island would be overwhelmed. But if Lucian could exploit the chaos, drive wedges between hostile factions, tip the tide with timely strikes, then hope might still survive. He tightened his grip on the map in his hands, eyes narrowing as he plotted his next move. In the swirling maelstrom of alliances and betrayals to come, Lucian vowed to do whatever it took to protect Nason Island, and to ensure its secrets remained safe until the succession ceremony crowned a new ruler. Several of the newcomers are masters secretly dispatched by powerful factions. Others are outsiders drawn by Nason Island's mysteries or seeking vengeance against Kuroto. Properly coordinated, they could exert significant influence within the ranks of the Behemoth Company. At the same time, she has reached out to two other powers, the Market Guild and the Celestial Order, in hopes of enlisting their support to help the palace resist Behemoth's invasion. The Market Guild refused outright, insisting on neutrality while covertly defecting to Behemoth. There is no chance of swaying them. The Celestial Order's leader stopped short of a formal alliance, but his words and actions clearly place him on the palace's side. Then there's the park commander, Hanghang, who has been dispatching his band of outlaws to harass the Behemoth Company long before its forces even arrived. Now that Behemoth has set its sights on the island, they will no doubt pursue him relentlessly. When Hanghang says he fights for himself, he means he will oppose the Behemoth Company to the bitter end, just not under the palace's banner. "Your Majesty, something's happening," Elijah announced, then carefully recounted everything Ruan Feng's scouts had reported. When he finished, King Nathan's eyes suddenly lit up. "He really is that powerful? What else do we know about him?" she asked, leaning forward. King Nathan had never feared that any alien stepping onto her island might be too strong. What concerned her was the opposite, that they might be too few, too weak, or too intimidated by the Behemoth Corporation to act. After all, the corporation's true target was the sacred tree, and ultimately all of Nathan Island. No matter what these newcomers wanted, it would inevitably clash with the Behemoth Corporation's designs, and she intended to fan the flames of that conflict. The greater the struggle, the more the corporation's power would be sapped, and only then would Nathan Island stand a chance. Elijah nodded. His name is Jin Bao. He's already a household name in the Eastern alien worlds, widely considered one of the top masters alive. Lucian stood atop the western watchtower, his gaze fixed on the restless sea lanes below. As Nason Island's chief external guardian, he sifted through intelligence reports from every neighboring realm, and lately one name had begun to dominate the headlines, the Golden Baby, a fearsome warrior whose fame had spread like wildfire. Lucian frowned as he reread his own warning. Wang must exercise extreme caution around someone this dangerous. That unexpected powerhouse threatened to upend the plan Lucian had so carefully set in motion. Months ago, he had been the one to shatter the sacred golden branch, triggering the island's contested succession. He'd never wanted the throne for himself, nor did he intend to betray Nason Island by throwing in with Behemoth's forces. If he had, the ancient sacred tree that granted him the title of Nason Guardian would have stripped him of his rank in an instant. So why break the branch at all? Because after years spent gathering information abroad, Lucian had witnessed the might of other nations firsthand. By comparison, Nason Island was nothing more than a blood-soaked backwater. Beyond its shores lay peace, stability, and prosperity, luxuries his homeland had never known. Here, the air was thick with violence and fear. Now, with the Golden Baby's arrival looming, Lucian faced a critical choice: protect Wang's mission, or sacrifice it altogether to secure Nason's frail future. Either way, the next move would determine whether the island survived or succumbed to the chaos it had long endured. Its people lived in endemic poverty and isolation. To the great powers beyond its shores, the island was nothing more than a prized morsel awaiting division. Lucian refused to sit idly by while foreign armies carved up his homeland. He resolved instead to take the boldest step, seize the tiger's pelt, draw every claimant into the game, and then, at the crucial moment, destroy the sacred tree himself. In doing so, he would forge a new destiny for Nason Island's people, even if it cost him his life. Because his one true aim was the island's freedom, the sacred tree had deemed him worthy of its highest trust and appointed him guardian of Nason. "I can't oversee everything from here," Lucian murmured. "I must go in person." With those words, King Nason vanished from the council chamber. In the next instant, he reappeared before Lucian. The two Nathan guards at Lucian's side dropped to one knee. The king inclined his head, then fixed his gaze on Lucian. "I understand you wish to speak with me," the king said. Lucian met the monarch's eyes without hesitation. "Yes, your majesty. I wish to study the sacred tree more closely. May I have your permission?" King Nason's expression softened, as though weighing the young guardian's resolve against the fate of the entire island. At last he spoke. "You have the realm's welfare at your heart, Lucian. You may approach the tree." Acknowledging the king's blessing, Lucian steadied himself for the trial ahead. The true struggle for Nason Island was only just beginning. Lucian didn't need any elaborate trickery to prove his strength. King Nathan merely smiled, unfazed. "All right," the king said. "I'll take you to see the sacred tree." Lucian didn't expect King Nathan to be so forthright. He had come to the island expressly to meet her, almost certainly to study the legendary sacred tree, and yet here she was, offering him what he wanted before he even asked. "Thank you," King Nathan said warmly, her eyes bright with anticipation. A pleased smile spread across Lucian's face. Since the young monarch was so agreeable, he was more than happy to oblige. "I'll show you the way." Nathan reached out as if to envelop him in her teleportation magic, whisking him straight to the palace's grove. But Lucian merely shook his head. "No need. I can sense the tree's aura. I'll find it on my own." Her lips parted in disbelief. "Impossible." Before she could do anything, Lucian vanished. Moments later, Nathan used her power to teleport to the heart of the palace grounds, and froze. There he stood, Lucian, already before the towering sacred tree, its ancient branches pulsing with power. Nathan Island was cocooned in the tree's magic. Even during the island's open season, no ordinary visitor could teleport onto its shores. Only King Nathan and her personal guards possessed that privilege, and now it seemed Lucian had found a way around them both. Despite Nason Island's strict anti-teleportation wards, Lucian dispensed with subtlety and simply reappeared beside the sacred tree, his arrival powered by raw arcane force. Honestly, if someone truly wished to study the tree, they could have stepped through the barrier unannounced. His polite greeting and request for counsel were nothing more than a display of courtesy. Lucian tilted his head back, staring up at the immense golden canopy. Light pulsed through its leaves in waves of faith and countless trapped souls. It looked like a tree, he thought, but in truth, it was a living nexus of ancient, overwhelmingly potent magic. The island's guardian inclined his head in acknowledgement. "That is the sacred tree," he said softly. "It was born of the greatest witchcraft of old and bears the collective will of every Nason king who ever ruled. If you desire its power more than I do my own life, you may pluck a golden branch and claim the throne of Nason by ending me." Lucian knelt before the glowing sacred tree, his eyes tracing the intricate runes etched into its trunk. King Nason watched him for a long moment, then spoke, her voice low but steady. "Lucian," she said, "if you accept the crown of Nason, you will inherit the kingdom of the divine and all its magic. You will rule this island, and the sacred tree itself will reveal its secrets to you." Lucian froze, disbelief written on his face. "Your Majesty, are you serious?" She inclined her head. "I am. Every king of Nason before me commanded tremendous power, and the tree's blessing made them nearly invincible. But I am weak. I possess only the basic privileges that the tree grants its servants. Now, with enemies massing beyond our shores, Nason Island needs a strong ruler, someone who can unite and protect us all." A surge of conflicting emotions washed over Lucian. Honor, fear, excitement. At last, he bowed his head. "I will do my best to live up to your trust." King Nason allowed herself a small, relieved smile. She had first offered the throne to Dao Diao, leader of the Celestial Court, but Dao Diao had refused, unwilling to become a puppet of the sacred tree. Nason had not expected to find a more fitting candidate so soon. In strength, Lucian surpassed Dao Diao by far. He was the hope Nason Island desperately needed. Lucian's integrity and the sacred tree's choice. Lucian had somehow bypassed the sacred tree's formidable wards to teleport directly onto Nason Island, but he never took that power for granted. Before arriving, he notified the council and asked for their blessing, demonstrating a respect for tradition few outsiders possess. His genuine curiosity about the tree's ancient witchcraft suggested he might even achieve a breakthrough in those long-forgotten arts. Yet the most important proof lay in the tree's own response to Jin Bao Bao. When tested, the sacred tree showed no hint of rejection, an unmistakable sign that Jin Bao Bao carries the potential to become the next Nazan king. No foreign army, however mighty, can sever the golden branch and claim the throne. At best, they can occupy the island, relocate the tree, or establish research outposts. Only the candidate the sacred tree recognizes can break that branch, defeat the reigning monarch, and inherit true sovereignty. And the tree's criterion is clear. Only a heart willing to sacrifice everything for Nason and for the tree itself will ever be deemed worthy of its blessing. Before stepping onto the island, Lucian, the one they called the Inverted Dagger of Paradise, had earned a reputation as nothing but a ruthless villain. Yet now, beneath that fearsome title, a genuine spirit of sacrifice had quietly taken root in his heart. That was why the young girl standing before him was prepared to give her life. She believed that by dying for him, she could elevate Lucian to become the new Nason king. Once crowned and blessed by the power of the sacred tree, he would grow immeasurably stronger, and under his rule, every soul still trapped in paradise could be ushered into the palace's ranks, forming an unbreakable shield to protect Nason Island. But Lucian refused her offer. He stepped back, eyes calm. King Nathan, watching from the shadows, breathed a sigh of relief, convinced that Lucian had failed the sacred tree's trial because he lacked the girl's selflessness. In truth, nothing could have been farther from the mark. Lucian's spiritual might was so vast it simply overpowered the tree's restrictive wards. With barely a thought, he unraveled its barriers, just as he had already shattered the island's space confinement law, that so-called anti-phantom statute, by bending spatial magic to his will. The girl blinked, surprise and determination flickering across her face. Lucian tilted his head, suddenly curious. "You're not afraid to die?" he asked gently, voice low. In that moment, he realized he was looking at someone far more extraordinary than he'd first believed, and his interest in the mysterious girl deepened. King Nathan shook his head, his expression steady. "Of course I'm afraid of death. I don't want to die. But that was before foreign invaders threatened our shores. Now, for the sake of this island, I would gladly give my life." Lucian met the king's calm gaze. "I'm not one of your Nathan Islanders, and you hardly know me. Aren't you worried that if I take the throne, I might turn against you, sell Nathan Island and the sacred tree for my own gain?" A faint smile curved Nathan's lips. "Lucian, when you inherit this crown, you don't just gain power, you inherit the collective will of every Nathan king who came before you. That will is woven into the roots of the sacred tree and the hearts of our people. It drives each monarch to protect this island and its legacy at any cost. You're powerful, there's no doubt. Perhaps strong enough to resist that ancient will, and if you truly could overcome it, then yes, the sacred tree in this kingdom would be yours to command. You could sell them tomorrow if you wished." Lucian studied the king. He didn't believe any ruler could stand against the force of a millennium's faith, nor the devotion of Nathan's people. "Is that what you trust will bind me to this land?" he asked quietly. King Nathan's smile deepened, unwavering. "Yes, whoever earns the crown must first prove worthy to carry that burden, and I have faith that you will." "If I become king, will Nathan's guards obey me?" Lucian asked, stroking his chin, curiosity flickering in his eyes. He'd felt uneasy about seizing the throne from the young ruler. His original plan had been simple: study the sacred tree, then depart, helping Nathan Island as his reward by driving off foreign invaders. But the girl had been startlingly eager to abdicate. She'd promised that, upon inheriting the crown, he would gain unfettered access to both the sacred tree and the kingdom of God. How could he refuse? In fact, ruling Nathan would only help him delve deeper into ancient witchcraft, mastering the art of channeling faith to expand its reach. The 1,000-year-old king's will was beyond the comprehension of ordinary mortals, and probably even beyond the old Taoist priest's capabilities. Yet for Lucian, whose power bordered on cosmic levels and who was backed by souls from other worlds, such force posed no challenge. "They answer only to the monarch," King Nathan replied with a gracious smile. "Once you sit on the throne, their loyalty will be yours." Lucian returned the smile, resolve settling in his features. "Very well, I accept." "You offered me the throne of your own free will," Lucian said, his voice cold and unyielding. "I never forced your hand. Now that I sit as King Nathan, the sacred tree, and the very kingdom of God, bow to my command." Chapter 567, Terribly Strong, second update. "Yes." King Nathan inclined his head. "If you shatter the golden branch, then come and slay me. Only then will you be acknowledged as the next King Nathan." Lucian smiled, unfazed. "There's no need for such theatrics," he replied. With that, he extended his hand and pressed his palm against the trunk of the holy tree. A blinding surge of psionic energy poured from him into the ancient wood, racing down its shafts toward the heart of the tree. Traditionally, claimants to the throne had broken the golden branch and slain the reigning monarch to force the holy tree's judgment. The new sovereign would then inherit the combined will of all past kings in full. Lucian, however, had no desire to inherit Nathan's legacy. His power was such that he could bypass the ritual altogether. Channeling his formidable mental strength directly into the tree's core, he quashed the lingering wills of every former king, bending them to his command. In that moment, Lucian transcended the old rules. As the new King Nathan, he stood not as a servant of the holy tree or of the kingdom of light, but as its true master. Lucian knew every secret of the sacred tree, and no power could hold him back. The moment he first arrived on Nason Island, he'd sensed the tree's immense energy and could have teleported straight into its heart, seizing control of the island in an instant. Yet he was no conqueror. Nason Island, backward and impoverished as it was, remained its own land and its own people's home. They had never invited outsiders. What moral right did anyone have to barge in under the pretense of spreading civilization, when in truth it was pure plunder? Still, those same foreign kings had come to him on bended knee, pleading for his help. They offered him the throne. "Subdue the will of the tree's former king," they promised, "and you may command the sacred tree, and the very kingdom of the divine, without restraint." How could he refuse? With a measured nod, Lucian accepted. "What are you doing?" A voice rang out in alarm as Lucian raised his hands toward the colossal trunk. He unleashed his power into the tree's core, and instantly, the spirits of the former monarchs trapped within it surged in defiance. The 1,000-year power of the tree was formidable, but it paled beside Lucian's might. Still, resistance came in furious waves, and the true battle for Nason Island's destiny had only just begun. The ground shook in a titanic upheaval that rippled across the entire island and throughout the kingdom. From his throne, King Nathan's eyes flew open in disbelief. He had never imagined events would spiral to this point. For centuries, Lucian, the warrior who had defied the sacred tree's will with nothing but his own strength, was finally wresting control. It was nothing short of astonishing. "Highness!" In that instant, the 9 Nathan guards, each stationed at distant strongholds, felt the sacred tree's disturbance. They materialized around the ritual grounds in a flash, weapons drawn and expressions grim. Before they could fully assess the situation, they saw Lucian pressing the massive, twisting branches of the ancient tree to the earth with sheer force. "Halt!" they cried in unison, lunging toward him. Their duty was crystal clear: protect king and sacred tree alike. To them, Lucian's assault looked like sacrilege. If the tree fell, they feared the kingdom's magic, and their king's legitimacy would perish with it. King Nathan remained motionless, neither intervening nor calling them back. A swirl of conflict churned within him. He had desired Lucian as his successor, yet only if Lucian followed the old rites. By tradition, the challenger was meant to snap the golden branch, slay the incumbent monarch, and inherit the throne as sanctioned by the tree's spirit. But Lucian had thrown those rules aside, choosing instead to conquer the tree itself. Nathan's jaw tightened. He understood Lucian's defiance, that he believed power should belong to the worthy, not to ancient mandates. And yet, the sacred tree's place in their world was more than ceremonial. Its roots bound the kingdom's very life force. If Lucian destroyed it now, everything Nathan had sworn to protect would vanish in an instant. So the king stayed his hand. He watched as his loyal guards advanced on Lucian, steel glinting beneath the storm-darkened sky. The echoes of their clash would reverberate across the realm, and Nathan knew that nothing from this day forward could ever be the same. Although she'd told him he was free to do as he pleased, she never imagined he actually would. Light magic, judgment. Alfonso, the swiftest of the 9 guards of Nathan, called upon his family's light magic. Glowing runes trailed behind the angelic warrior as twin beams of searing radiance, each as thick as his forearm, lanced toward Lucian, poised to purify him on the spot. Law of the thunder god, lightning strike. Almost simultaneously, Anthony, the demigod born of the Olympic thunder god's blood, hurled a crackling bolt of stormfire, his speed nearly matching Alfonso's assault. Light magic, radiant explosion. Standing firm, Lucian reined in the sacred tree's will within him and split a strand of his attention. First, he mirrored their light magic, forging a beam as wide as a water drum. With a roar of power, he rammed it into Alfonso's attack, shattering the rival light beam and blasting the angel guard clear off his feet. Before Alfonso could rise, Lucian cloaked himself in crackling electricity and met Anthony's lightning head-on, dispersing it with raw, thunderous force. Then, summoning every ounce of his storm-born might, he unleashed his thunder-slaying spell, a jet-black surge of lightning that struck Anthony squarely, leaving the god-born warrior stunned and smoking in its wake. Lucian's eyes gleamed with a cold light. As a descendant of the thunder god, he wielded a forbidden art, godslayer technique, human body refinement, capable of sealing even deities. No storm, no thunderbolt could break its binding force. He had just neutralized 2 assailants when another attack erupted from below. Metallic chains, alchemically forged, shot up from the ground to ensnare him. The caster was Marcello of Precious Metal, one of the 9 elite Nason guards. Marcello's lips curled in triumph, until Lucian thought the word, and the chains recoiled, wrapping tightly around Marcello himself. "Kill him," Marcello snarled as he struggled. "Eat him," spat another guard on the periphery. "Blow him to dust," shouted the third. Their 3 ranged blasts streaked toward Lucian, but he barely flinched. With a subtle gesture, the spells collapsed into sparks against his refined aura. No sooner had those threats been dispatched than 3 more Nason guards lunged in close. The first drew a massive blade and swung it in a top-to-bottom arc so fierce the air itself screamed. The sword's energy howled, as though determined to carve Lucian into pieces. Beside him, the second guard's body convulsed in a riot of shifting colors. Muscles bulged unnaturally, and a bestial snarl tore from his throat. In a single horrific motion, his jaws stretched wide, aiming straight for Lucian's head. The third warrior stood rigid, every inch of his flesh etched with luminous runes. Arcane power thrummed through those symbols, bolstering his form. He clenched his fist, runes flaring, and drew back his arm for a punch he claimed would shake the heavens and bring the gods themselves to tears. 3 deadly strikes, each backed by Nason's finest combat arts, converged on Lucian. Yet he remained calm, the storm's legacy pulsing within his veins. As they closed in, he raised his hand, and the thunder answered. Mochizuki Satoru, a swordsman descended from Japan's storied Mochizuki clan, had come to Nason Island seeking solitude after refusing to join the invasion forces. Eventually, he enlisted with the Nason Guard. Bestia, once the leader of the Paradise sect and a god-blessed warrior who coexisted with the resentful god of the Dead Lake, had likewise joined the Guard following his defeat in the Thet upside-down trial. And Valkyrie Gunna Ortland, a native of the island, bore the Nathan rune, granting her enhanced strength, near invulnerability, and the ability to heal even grievous wounds. The 3 elite melee Nathan guards now surged forward in perfect harmony, blades and fists aimed at Lucian. He met their onslaught with cold detachment. True, this level of power could threaten top masters, or even the heads of prestigious schools, in the outside world. To Lucian, however, it was nothing more than child's play. Time, freeze. He waved his hand, and reality itself stuttered. In an instant, motion ceased, steel hovered in midair, bodies hung poised in attack, even falling dust particles froze in place. Lucian arched an eyebrow, then flicked his wrist. Time snapped back. The 3 guards were ejected as though struck by an invisible force, hurtling backward and skidding across the ground. Unbelievable. King Nathan's voice cracked as his pupils constricted in shocked disbelief. Lucian simply lowered his hand and watched them scramble to their feet, each now painfully aware that they had just collided with a power far beyond their imagining. Elijah shook her head in amazement. She'd always assumed Lucian might only be as strong as the hanging inverted, perhaps slightly stronger, but she never imagined he could be this formidable. By sheer force of will, he had not only pinned down a 1,000-year-old sacred tree, but also seized its attention long enough to shatter the 6 Nasanwe sentinels who had surrounded him. It was important to remember that each of those Nasanwe was a supreme warrior in the outside world. No sooner had the 6 fallen than the 7th Nasanwe struck. She was the eldest and most powerful of them all, Erica Joaquina. With a cold smile, Erica unleashed her signature technique, the Heavenly Domain Divine Art. In an instant, she sought to drag Lucian's consciousness into the boundless celestial realm, a place where time flowed at a vastly different rate. A single second outside could stretch into decades, centuries, or even millennia within the heavens. Chapter 568, Heavenly Salvation, Update 1. The time realm may be riddled with loopholes, but it also bears its own mysteries. I never imagined Nathanwe possessed such an uncanny gift. When Lucian's vision cleared, the ancient sacred tree had vanished. In its place stretched an endless pathway suspended in a vast cosmic void. Black emptiness pressed in on either side, flecked with distant pinpricks of starlight. Ahead, the sorceress Erica sat cross-legged, her posture regal and unmoving. Behind her hovered a great portal, a door-shaped arch pulsing with pale energy. Behind Lucian, the path simply dissolved into the nothingness. "This is heaven," Erica pronounced, her voice cold and imperious. "I am its sovereign, and here you shall remain trapped for all eternity." Lucian fought back a laugh. "Heaven, is it? Nice try. You think calling this place heaven and presenting an infinite corridor will break my will? Your real aim is to force me to wander until I collapse, isn't it?" He raised a hand, feeling the familiar tingle of temporal energy at his fingertips. As a chronomancer steeped in the study of time's laws, he'd already sensed the subtle distortions at work in this so-called paradise. Erica's lips curved in a thin, disdainful smile. "Your arrogance will be your undoing, Lucian. In this realm, time itself conspires against you." But Lucian only inclined his head, eyes glinting with defiance. "Then let time try its worst. I've mastered its currents, and I'll find my way out, no matter how long it takes." Chapter X, The Timeless Arena. "Here, no ordinary person can reach you, and you can't harm them either," Lucian explained. "The only path to victory is to outlast your opponent until their mind finally gives way. If they endure longer than you, your sanity will snap first." Erica met his gaze without a flicker of uncertainty. Pinpointing a prison's weakness was one thing, overcoming it was quite another. She herself could withstand this timeless realm for up to 700 years, and in all her battles, the toughest adversary she'd ever trapped had fallen in just 70. "I'm not in the mood to toy around," Erica said, her voice as calm as ever. With a swift motion, Lucian called out, "Super Magic Fairy Ball!" Instantly, a glowing sphere of temporal energy enveloped him. He stepped forward, unwavering. In this infinite timescape, any pursuer, no matter how determined, finds each footfall looping right back to its starting point. Time resets itself, trapping challengers in an endless circle. Now Lucian was ready to shatter that cycle and test Erica's limits. Lucian stood perfectly still, the radiant orb of the fairy sphere hovering above his open palm. To anyone watching, it might have looked as though nothing extraordinary was happening, but in truth, he had just unraveled the very fabric of the kingdom of heaven's time barrier. Imagine this. You set out from point A at 9 o'clock, walking for an hour to reach point B at 10. The moment you arrive, your local time is snapped back to 9, and with it your body, your hunger, even your weariness are all restored to their state an hour before. You could march from A for 10,000 years straight, constantly resetting the clock, and you'd never age a day. Only your spirit, the essence of your consciousness, would endure every second you lived, stretching into an endless torment. 10,000 years of unbroken thought, any soul would shatter and despair. That, however, was exactly what the kingdom of heaven intended to inflict on its enemies. Its temporal shield preyed on the spirit, subjecting captives to eternal anguish without ever letting them die. But Lucian had a trump card. He invoked the time protection enchantment woven into the fairy sphere itself, sealing his spirit off from the kingdom's temporal snares. Physically and mentally, he remained anchored in the present, immune to their cruel loop. "How is this possible?" the guardian goddess whispered, eyes wide with disbelief. She summoned every heavenly law at her command, every glittering rune of that divine power, but none of it touched him now. The sphere's pale light drove back her spells like water off steel. Lucian took another step forward, calm and unhurried, his face set with unwavering resolve. Never before had any foe found a way to breach her domain's time magic. Never before had the kingdom of heaven been so thoroughly outmaneuvered. And yet here he was. Since its creation, the celestial domain had been deemed truly unbreakable, except for one fatal flaw. Its own architect, unable to withstand the crushing loneliness of endless time, deliberately removed any built-in failsafe. When she later trained under her master, she would even disable the domain at will. No teacher could resist that oppressive isolation. Had she been immune to solitude herself, not even a master who knew her secret dispelling technique could have breached her defense. Flawed as it is, it remains terrifyingly potent, Lucian thought, recalling every detail of the technique. He stepped forward to where Erica hovered, fingers poised. With a light touch to her brow, he synchronized his perception to hers, committing the choreography of her celestial domain to memory. Every shimmering barrier, every echo of suspended time, he absorbed it all. Even its loopholes were a treasure, for they told him exactly how to improve the art. Harnessing his own command of chronomancy, Lucian would refine this imperfect spell into something flawless. He had already chosen its name, Salvation of the Celestial Realm. In his hands, it would no longer allow a single escapee. Any enemy caught within would tumble endlessly through suspended moments, trapped for eternity. Had he not mastered time magic, he would have been forced to challenge Erica directly, matching strength against strength in a brutal exchange. But her domain, twisted to prey on bodies untrained in mental endurance, held no sway over him. Equipped with both her original design and his enhancements, Lucian held the key to an absolute victory. Lucian's pulse raced. If he were to go head-to-head with those veteran Taoist mind cultivators, he'd be worn down for sure. He needed to finish this now. Conscript the spirits and send forth the general. Stepping out of Erica's heaven, Lucian wove his will around the gnarled trunk of the sacred tree. The moment he activated his spirit-mustering technique, the tree's resistance collapsed by half. Deep within that living wood lay the bound essences of every nascent king who had ever tended it, their wills fused into a single, tenacious consciousness. In effect, it was a forest of little gods, much like the tutelary immortals worshipped in China's far northeast, each empowered by belief itself. By drawing on his conscription spell, Lucian struck directly at those gathered wills. A tide of spectral insignias spiraled from his outstretched palm, latching onto root after root, severing their supernatural cohesion. The sacred tree trembled, its bark cracking, as spectral monarchs wailed and fell one by one. "It's done," Lucian whispered, though the roots still quivered beneath his feet. He pressed on without hesitation, letting his mana surge and surge again. Wherever a root reached into the earth, his magic followed, branching through the soil to the farthest corners of the island. In moments, every hidden tendril of the tree lay under his command. Lucian drew a deep breath, steadying the residual energy. With the sacred tree's collective will subdued, he had not only neutralized his greatest obstacle, but also secured a conduit through which his power now pulsed beneath the island itself. The victory was absolute, and he had done it swiftly, before any rival mind cultivators could even react. In an instant, every secret behind the sacred tree's formation, and all the arcane knowledge tied to it, flooded Lucian's mind. A surge of power radiated out across the island. He had become Nason's new king. "Bow before your sovereign," he commanded, though the words were unnecessary. Across the courtyard, the Nason guards froze in mid-stride, then lowered the air weapons and dropped to their knees. In their hearts, they recognized the tree's chosen ruler, but it was Lucian himself, channeling its magic, who had issued the command. "He actually did it," murmured one guard, amazement clear in his voice. "Nathan, The former monarch, a 17-year-old girl, stood a few paces away, her face a mix of shock and fury. The privileges the tree had granted her vanished the moment Lucian assumed its power. She hadn't believed he could wrest control of both the tree and the island from her. Even more troubling, Lucian's will was untainted by any lingering influence of Nathan's reign. His sudden mastery of the tree's magic proved not only that he could override her authority, but also that his strength far outmatched her own. As the guards continued their reverent bowing, Nathan realized with a sinking heart that the kingdom and the sacred tree itself now answered to Lucian alone. Lucian gently withdrew his hand from the ancient bark of the sacred tree. The murmuring chorus of past kings' wills faded into silence, leaving only the soft rustle of silver-green leaves overhead. He stepped back and faced the former ruler of Nathan Island, who still knelt before him. "You may stand," Lucian said, his voice steady and kind. The old king rose slowly, a mixture of awe and relief on his lined face. Lucian offered him a reassuring smile. "Rest easy. As your new sovereign, I will shield Nathan Island from any who would dare invade our shores." Though the weight of his predecessor's spirits no longer bound him, Lucian had gained something far greater, the ancient wizard, now manifest, from the heart of the tree itself. With that ally at his side, protecting this simple island would be little more than a pleasant duty. More than that, he'd longed for a secluded place to devote himself to his magical studies. Nathan's hidden coves and peaceful groves were perfect. A frightened little girl pressed against Lucian's cloak, her eyes wide beneath tangled dark hair. Bending down, he offered her a gentle hand. "You're safe now," he told her. She hesitated, then let him lift her to her feet. Nearby, a young guard named Elijah Jones held his rifle at the ready, but the barrel wavered, never quite settling on its mark. Lucian turned to him, gaze firm. "Elijah, you were the one who shattered the golden branch. Explain yourself." All around them, the islanders watched in hushed anticipation. Nathan Island had a new king, one whose power and promise would determine their fate against forces both seen and unseen. Lucian's mind still echoed with the sacred tree's revelation. It had been Elijah of the Nathan Guard who snapped the golden branch and set the throne's succession in motion. And when the guard attacked him moments ago, only 7 of the 9 charged forward. Elijah and Elena had conspicuously held their ground. Chapter 569, The New 9 Guardians of Nathan, Second Update. Elena was the only member of Nathan's defenders whose gift offered no direct combat power. Her soothing ability, combined with her role as liaison to the outside world, was vital to securing resources for the island and protecting the Holy Prince, tasks that never required her to draw a weapon. Elijah Jones, by contrast, was in a league of his own. His alchemically forged revolver, fitted with a left-twist spiral barrel, let him bend the trajectory of each shot with uncanny precision and devastating force. Alongside his raw physical strength, ranked among the top on Nathan Island, he was a battlefield titan. That he hadn't fired a single shot until now spoke volumes, unless he'd been counting on Lucian to finish off the world tree himself. Lucian's voice rang out in stunned disbelief. "What? Elijah shattered the golden branch?" King Nathan and Supreme Commander Bada Nathan exchanged alarmed glances. They had long suspected someone on the island tampered with the golden branches. Without that act, the world tree would never have recognized Nathan's claim, but they had never imagined Elijah Jones capable of such betrayal. After all, his unwavering devotion to Nathan Island had always been beyond question. In the Grand Palace of Nathan, as the attendants readied themselves for the ceremony, all eyes turned to Elijah, young, clever, and unmistakably the king's favorite. A hush fell over the assembly, and someone at the back whispered, "Elijah, why are you doing this?" No one doubted King Lucian's authority. Since his ascension, every child priest and islander had believed in his vision and followed his decree. Yet Elijah found himself caught off guard by how swiftly events had spiraled beyond his expectations. He had chosen not to stop Lucian when the 7 guardians failed to intercept him. After all, the new king had hinted at destroying the world tree. If the tree fell, it would shatter the ancient bonds that trapped the monarch, the priests, and all of Nathan Island's people. Freedom and self-determination, those were the ideals Elijah had dreamed of, even if achieving them meant his own sacrifice. Now, however, Lucian had done the unthinkable. He hadn't destroyed the world tree at all, but bent its power to his will. In one decisive stroke, he had become ruler of Nason Island by mastering the very force everyone believed was untouchable. Elijah pressed his palms to his temples. "Enough," he breathed. "I must see it for myself." His face must have betrayed his turmoil, because in the next heartbeat Lucian appeared at his side, calm, imposing, and resolute. Without a word, the king reached out, brushing fingertips against Elijah's brow. Elijah braced himself as Lucian's gaze turned inward, delving into his memories. Lucian watched Elijah for a moment, then closed his eyes. He whispered, "Words can deceive, but memories don't lie. It's far simpler to read them directly." When he opened his eyes again, he already understood Elijah's true motive in severing the golden branch, to clear the way for Bohemios's claim to the throne. "You're kind-hearted," Lucian said, "but dangerously naive if you think that destroying the divine tree will spare the islanders of Nason." For years, Bohemios had sacrificed countless lives and poured out immeasurable resources in his relentless pursuit of the divine tree. Now that it lay in ruins, he would not simply set the islanders free. If they were ordinary peasants, they'd be dismissed as worthless, perhaps paraded to bolster his self-styled image of justice. But the people of Nason were no ordinary folk. Each carried unique talents, hidden strengths that made them treasures in Bohemios's eyes, almost as priceless as the divine tree itself. If his sole aim had been to forge them into corporate soldiers, their lives, however brutal, might have continued under strict oversight. But Lucian knew Bohemios's ambition ran deeper. If the islanders were destined for anatomical experimentation, their fate would be far worse. Living specimens, condemned to become little more than dissected cadavers. And for them, death might have been the kinder end. One more thing. Can Elijah really destroy the God Tree? It's not that simple. The God Tree can't just be wiped out overnight, and the people of Bohemios aren't foolish enough to make his task that easy. Without outside interference, Elijah's entire plan is bound to fail. Bohemios doesn't just control the God Tree, they hold sway over all of Nathan Island, forcing every islander and every so-called black household into submission. Unless Elijah severs the golden branches or stages a coup to place a new king on the throne, Governor Nason will never open the island gates to him. With the God Tree at their command, Bohemios could easily outbid anyone, offering at least 10 times the normal price to secure Nathan Island. At that price, they're hardly likely to back down. And even if they did commit all their forces to an assault on Nason, they would only weaken themselves. That's when Bohemios's many enemies would strike, most notably the organization known as the Debt Collectors. They've suffered under Bohemios's rule for years, and the moment Bohemios overextends itself against Nason, the Debt Collectors will swoop in to reclaim what they've lost. Lucian leaned forward, voice low. Listen closely. Major factions: the Tong Tong, the Emerald Society, the Fish Dragon Association, the Sons of the Earth, will seize any excuse to crack down on Bohemios. Before long, they'll move to claim the God Tree for themselves. No one wants to see Bohemios' forces growing unchecked and then reshaping the world in their image. Elijah sank to the stone floor, back against the wall, eyes vacant. "I only ever wanted freedom from the God Tree's curse," he murmured. "I wanted the children of Nathan Island to grow up happy, just like kids anywhere else, instead of being forced to drink blood and spill it." Lucian's expression softened. "If you truly care about Nathan Island, then step down from your post as the island's protector. From now on, you'll serve as an ordinary Nason, vowed to defend the island and bear the weight of your sins." With a gesture, Lucian stripped Elijah of his unique powers. He imposed no harsher penalty, not because he doubted Elijah's usefulness, but because he had never regarded him as king of Nason in the first place. Removing his abilities was punishment enough. Chapter 7. A King's Mercy. Lucian stood atop the dais, his new crown gleaming under the torchlight. Around him, the assembled Nathan guards watched in tense silence. Elijah, once condemned as a traitor, knelt before him, his heart pounding. Only moments ago, Lucian had every right to punish him to the full extent of the law. Yet something in Lucian's gaze told him that mercy would win tonight. "Rise, Elijah," Lucian said quietly. His voice carried the calm authority of a born ruler. "Your past transgressions have been weighed, and I, including the memory of King Nathan and the loyalty of these guards, choose forgiveness instead of vengeance. Elijah dared to inhale a shaky breath. He bowed his head lower, his fist pressed to his chest in a solemn vow. Your Majesty, I am profoundly grateful for your mercy. I swear on my life to protect Nathan Island and to atone for all my mistakes. Lucian inclined his head approvingly. Very good. From this moment, you will serve as one of our elite sentinels, not as captain. The new captain of the Nathan Guards is Miss Lee. He motioned toward the side of the hall, where she stepped forward with composed grace. Miss Lee's dark hair was neatly bound, and her sharp eyes reflected both surprise and pride. She had been next in line for command, and now Lucian's words confirmed it. Miss Lee, he continued, I trust you to lead the Nathan Guards with honor. Do you accept this responsibility? She met his gaze without hesitation. I do, Your Majesty. I will serve the crown and our island with unwavering loyalty. Lucian turned his attention to the former King Nathan, Li Mumu, who stood discreetly behind the ranks. Though his body bore no remarkable power, Li Mumu's intellect had once persuaded the God Tree to choose him as king. Now, he watched the ceremony with quiet relief and a scholar's curiosity. Li Mumu, Lucian said, nodding respectfully, your guidance has been invaluable. I hope you will remain by my side as an advisor. A gentle smile curved Li Mumu's lips. It would be my honor, Your Majesty. With that, Lucian raised his sword arm, and the torchbearers ignited the hall's braziers, bathing the throne room in warm light. Forgiveness had reclaimed unity, and under Lucian's reign, Nathan Island would step into a new era, one of justice tempered by mercy. From the moment Lucian discovered that the Golden Branch had been severed, he recognized it as a deliberate ploy by Behemoth Company. He acted immediately, rallying the island's major clans and influential figures to his side before Behemoth could quietly seize control of Nathan Island. It was astonishing that someone so young could think so strategically. Not long ago, Lucian had still been fumbling through basic family etiquette. Once the threat was neutralized, he planned to withdraw for intensive cultivation, entrusting the day-to-day governance of Nathan Island to Li Mumu. Chapter 570, The Old Wizard Who Breached the Palace and Li Muxuan, Part 1. Your Majesty, I'm ready. Li Muxuan knelt swiftly before the king, her gaze steady. Whether she stood as Nathan's sovereign or as the guardian of the island made no difference to her resolve. Her sole mission remained unchanged: protect Nathan Island and its sacred tree at all costs. Though today's turn of events had unfolded differently from her plans, the outcome thus far appeared promising. Very well, the king replied, rising from his throne. Someone has infiltrated the royal city. Let us investigate immediately. Li Muxuan rose at once, every sinew tensed for action. Beside her, the chamber fell silent, but for a moment only. Across the palace grounds, a subtle quiver rippled through the air. At that same instant, Lucian felt it too. Through his bond with the sacred tree, he perceived the intrusion, a small group forcing their way onto the palace grounds. The tree's power granted Nathan's ruler a unique gift: the ability to sense any new arrival to the island, passively detecting footprints and life signs as they crossed the shore. Alternatively, he could focus his awareness on a single point and peer through the veil of foliage, seeing all that lay hidden there. But this magic came with limits. He could monitor only one place at a time, leaving every other corner of the island beyond his sight. That gap in perception was exactly what master infiltrators relied on. Experts in concealment could slip ashore unseen and melt into the shadows before the king knew they were there. Yet Lucian's bond to the sacred tree was neither casual nor fleeting. It was a living conduit, too strong, too direct, to be fooled by even the most practiced cloaking spells. As the king motioned for Li Muxuan to follow, Lucian's senses sharpened. Somewhere within these palace walls, unseen adversaries tested the island's defenses, and he would be the first to meet them. Lucian's mental power was immense. Thanks to the bond with the sacred tree, he could passively perceive virtually everything happening on the island. Unless he deliberately shut off his awareness, he could even sense the faintest wriggle of earthworms in the soil up to 100 meters away. So there really were formidable intruders. A company of dozens had breached the royal city's defenses. Most were clearly seasoned outsiders, and one among them radiated power on par with Tabor, the dean of Flamal College, second only to the legendary Lucian in all of China. How daring to storm the palace itself! Lucian teleported to the palace's outer ward just in time to see the strangers felling rank-and-file Nathan sentries with effortless strikes. A squad of grizzled, ill-tempered Nathan guards rushed forward to engage, but they were cut down as easily as slicing through ripe fruit. Most lay crumpled within minutes. That was, until an elderly mage in black robes, his wand gleaming in hand, stepped out to confront the intruders. Li Huo. A torrent of fire burst from the old wizard's wand, an inferno so sharp and powerful it sent several Nathan guards sprawling backward. Ordinary flames could do little against these seasoned warriors, but Li Huo was different. A cutting, searing blaze that carved through any defense. "Regroup," the mage barked. At his command, more Nathan guards who had been hovering at the edges of the battlefield closed in, flanking him on all sides. They watched, astonished, as his wand crackled with residual embers. His mastery of Li Huo, I've never seen the spell used so precisely. Who is this veteran? Lucian remained perfectly still, eyes narrowed. The old wizard was formidable, but hardly a threat to Lucian, or to the combined strength of the Nasan Wei. Still, magic left traces, and Lucian's intuition had already whispered a name. In this world, only 3 sorcerers could command such raw power. First was Isaac Tubo, dean of Flamal College, the equivalent of Dumbledore, and Lucian had met him. This was not Tubo. Second was the Voldemort of this realm, long since destroyed, by Lucian himself when he first mastered the art of cloning this world. That left only one possibility, Gellert Grindelwald. Stephen White, the most feared black magician in the world, had once wielded unimaginable power, but when ordinary soldiers armed with thermal weapons shattered his faith and brought him low, the Emerald Society locked him away. It had to be him, holed up in the palace's deepest vaults, and now the Jade Society's agents were moving in. Before Lucian could react, iron-black sand roared up from the floor, coiling around a lone intruder's legs and flinging him at Lucian's feet. Lucian crouched, eyes cold. "Tell me," he said, voice low, "are you here to destroy the sacred tree?" With a gentle press of his palm against the man's forehead, Lucian pierced his mind, unraveling memories like threads. The intruders served the Emerald Society. Their orders were to escort Stephen White into the palace, locate the sacred tree, and destroy it. They feared that if Behemoth seized the divine tree, he could biologically engineer vast hordes of alien beings, and in doing so, tip the balance between humans and aliens everywhere. Such power would threaten not only the world's fragile equilibrium, but the Emerald Society's own designs. None of the factions could challenge Behemoth Company directly. Their forces simply weren't a match, and even a narrow victory would cost them too dearly. The easiest way to stop Behemoth from claiming the sacred tree was to destroy it outright, leaving the company with nothing more than a few islanders, which was hardly a victory. It wasn't only the Jade Society plotting this. As Lucian scouted the island, he discovered that temporary workers Zhang Chulan, Feng Baobao, Xiao Zizai, Clarinet, Wang Zhengqiu, and Lao Meng had slipped ashore in a submersible. They were joined by swordsmen from the Fish and Dragon Society, strangers from the Directory, and ruthless debt collectors, all with the same goal, preventing Behemoth Company from getting its hands on the sacred tree. Lucian couldn't help but smirk at the unfolding spectacle. He decided to wait until every faction had revealed itself, then deliver a lesson none of them would forget. That way, no one would dare exploit the sacred tree or Nathan Island again, and he could withdraw quietly once his granddaughter was safe. A dozen would-be heroes, plotting trouble for my granddaughter. What a joke. Let's see how I deal with you. While the Nathan guards were locked in battle with White outside the palace gates, a white-haired elder suddenly charged through the courtyard entrance. His hooked fingers, glinting like steel talons, swept aside any intruder who dared stand in his path. Lucian watched him stride forward and whispered, "Lai Muxuan." He'd promised Lu Jin he would find this man, and now here he was. On the island, most only knew him as Li Mumu's revered grandfather. But before he came here, Li Muxuan had been a rising star of the Quanxing sect, a contemporary of sectmaster Wu Gensheng, and notorious across the land as the evil child. Born the youngest heir of the wealthy Li family, the chief patrons of the Sanyi sect, He'd changed his name out of admiration for Sanyi Xuanmen and sought to join their ranks. The sect's entrance trials were legendary for their brutality. Li Muxuan endured every test and rose to the challenge, yet he emerged convinced that Master Zuo Ruotong had tricked him. In furious betrayal, he renounced Sanyi and became a disciple of Wang Yaozu in Quanxing. That anger, however, took a hidden toll. A crippling heart disease began to gnaw at him. Desperate for a cure, he turned back to Wu Gensheng for help. Together, they once disguised themselves as Sanyi disciples and slipped back into the sect, a dangerous ruse sparked by nothing more than the hope of healing. Now, with blades clashing around the palace and Li Muxuan's stormy past laid bare, Lucian realized their encounter would determine far more than the fate of a single man. Chapter 7, The Fall of the Sanyi Sect. By a tragic accident, Wu Gensheng's shatter demaster Zuo Ruotong's prized third-tier reverse life technique. Not long after Zuo Ruotong's death, the Sanyi sect launched a campaign to track down Wu Gensheng and restore the lost art of reverse life. In their zeal, they unwittingly provoked the entire Quanxing clan. The ensuing conflict escalated into a full-scale massacre, and by dawn the Sanyi sect lay in ruins. The very man who had first introduced Wu Gensheng to Sanyi's teachings was consumed by guilt. Unable to face the wreckage of his life's work, he fled to the remote shores of Nasan Island and disappeared into seclusion. Only one disciple survived the bloodbath, Lu Jin, the youngest student of Master Zuo. He alone carries the memory and the secret of Sanyi's greatest legacy, the Taoist art known as reversing the 8 directions. Also called human magnetism, this discipline manipulates the ambient force field around the practitioner. It began centuries ago as a simple street performer's novelty, mere sleight of hand and minor telekinetic parlor tricks. Later, Wang Yaozu refined those basics into a formidable offensive technique. Finally, Li Muxuan elevated it further, transforming it into a spell that rivals the most renowned sects. With a mere flick of the fingers, a master of reversing the 8 directions can seize dozens of foes at once, bending them to his will, or contorting their bodies until they break. Now, with the Sanyi sect extinguished and its secrets stolen or lost to time, Lu Jin stands alone as the last keeper of human magnetism's true power. And somewhere on Nasan Island, Li Muxuan broods over the ruin he set in motion, awaiting the day he might atone for a sin he can neither undo nor ever forget. Chapter 571. One Person is Enough, Second Update. The moment Li Muxuan leapt into the fray, White, who had been desperately holding his ground under Nathan Guard's relentless assault, finally broke. Even as the world's foremost master of black magic, his arcane powers couldn't save him from the barrage. With a strangled cry, he collapsed to the blood-stained earth, grievously wounded. White lay on his back, chest heaving. He tightened one hand into a claw, black veins crawling up his arm. "I never expected so many formidable fighters on this island," he rasped. "Shame I won't live to witness this fabled ancient witchcraft myself." He spoke more out of spite than sincerity. White hadn't sailed to Nathan Island strictly on Emerald Society orders. He had his own reasons. Even when the Jade Society had captured him, it was only because he chose not to resist. He'd wanted to be taken alive. His true goal, he'd confessed in a rare moment of honesty, was to see the legendary sacred tree formed by ancient witchcraft and to measure its power against his own. Lucian watched him with cool detachment. Beside him, Elijah stepped forward and pressed the revolver's barrel against White's temple. The silver cylinder gleamed in the dim light. "Your Majesty," Elijah said, voice low and steady, "shall I end him here and now?" Lucian's eyes flickered over the fallen sorcerer, torn between curiosity and ruthlessness. Would he grant White a final mercy, or demonstrate that on this island, one person was more than enough to tip the balance of power? Lucian shook his head with a wry smile. No need. He stepped toward White and lifted his right hand, which glowed a deep crimson. With a single, effortless wave, every welt and gash along White's arms and torso closed up. In moments, he looked as unscarred as before the fight. White staggered back, stunned. "I know why you've come to the island," Lucian said, voice calm. "Relax. Stay as long as you like. Take your time before deciding. You might see things differently." White's eyes narrowed with suspicion. "And you're not worried I'll strike you as soon as your guard is down?" He thought it through. With Lucian's miraculous healing on his side, the Nathan guards wouldn't stand a chance unless they all fought together. Behemoth Company was poised to invade Nathan Island soon, and the sacred tree was practically defenseless. Capturing both the island and the tree would be easy, but why would Lucian let him roam free? Lucian chuckled softly. If that's your plan, be my guest. At White's words, the Nathan guards shifted, hands inching toward weapons. Lucian remained composed until White fixed him with a cold stare and activated his legitimacy. Lucian closed his eyes, bracing himself as White's will pressed against the walls of his mind. The instant it happened, Li Muxuan's blood ran cold and a chill sweat broke out across his brow. What a terrifying power! King Nathan actually wields this level of strength, he gasped. Through his heightened senses, the energy radiating from Lucian was boundless, an ant confronting a dragon. The gap was so vast he couldn't even discern its outer limits. Who is he? How did he become King Nathan? Granddaughter, what's going on here? Li Muxuan spun toward Li Mumu, who had been standing quietly at his side. In the mere hours since they'd parted, someone else had claimed the throne, and without harming his granddaughter, no less. That alone would have been astonishing, but to hear that this stranger had ignored the rules of succession and fused with the sacred tree, it sounded impossible. Grandpa, Li Mumu said softly, though her tone carried an edge of warning. Please show proper respect to His Majesty. The king used his own immense power to bypass every tradition and became one with the sacred tree itself. On the surface, she was chiding her grandfather for his rudeness. Beneath it, she was pleading with him not to provoke the newcomer, whose strength dwarfed their own. Li Muchuan's eyes went cold. What do you mean? You can fuse with the sacred tree by force? He'd lived on Nathan Island long enough to know exactly how formidable that ancient giant was. No one could simply overpower it. Who was this new king, claiming such impossible feats? Was every alien beyond the island that much stronger? He turned sharply to Mumu. Have someone recall every islander to the palace. We'll await further orders there. Lucian didn't mention the matter of Lu Jin. For now, it would be wiser to settle Nathan Island's crisis first. Mumu hesitated, frowning. Your Majesty, the islanders are superb guerrilla fighters. They're at their best when dispersed through the forest. Gathering them in the palace could blunt their edge. Li Muchuan's lips pressed into a thin line. What's so terrifying about Behemoth Corporation? He muttered. They've experimented on and recruited all manner of aliens, yes, but their real asset is the army of genetically enhanced soldiers they've grown, and even those lab-bred warriors aren't in the same league as genuine extraterrestrials. He paused, gaze flicking back to Lucian. If you truly believe you can confront the sacred tree head-on, then perhaps it's time we all learn exactly how strong this new king of ours really is. Genetic warriors, like the famed hero Shan, are forged through the most advanced and dangerous gene therapies, methods so unstable their success rates barely register. By contrast, the treatments given to ordinary soldiers are reliable and almost always work, but they only yield modest strength gains. Soldiers who are stronger than civilians, nothing more. Yet, if these elite warriors are deployed en masse and armed with cutting-edge thermal weapons, their combined firepower becomes a truly terrifying threat. Nazenwei's battle plan was simple. Have the islanders fan out across the rugged terrain, ambushing the genetic warriors in small, manageable groups and wearing them down one by one. If the palace's defenders could lure the enemy away from their heavy weapons emplacements, they'd stand a much better chance of holding the fortress. It won't work without reinforcements, one captain protested. We need those extra soldiers here to protect the palace. Lucian met her gaze without flinching. I'll handle any invaders who come from the outside. A hush fell over the officers. They all knew Lucian's reputation. He had once forcibly fused with the sacred tree and single-handedly shattered Nazenwei's alliance. If anyone could keep the enemy at bay, it was him. Lucian shook his head, dismissing the bravado on display. It's one thing to boast you can beat every foreign invader in single combat, but to dismantle Behemoth's genetically engineered legions and their thermal artillery on your own, that's desperation, not confidence. A rough voice from the council chamber shot back. Kid, if you're that sure of yourself, I respect it, but talk's cheap. What are you waiting for? Prove it. Li Muxuan couldn't contain his laughter at Lucian's audacity. Unfazed, Lucian met his gaze and issued a single command: send the evacuation order. Only the island's native populace was notified, summoned directly to the safety of the palace grounds. The artisans, traders, and scoundrels of the market district and the fortified enclave known as Paradise received no warning. Lucian had his reasons. The islanders who worshipped the sacred tree were utterly loyal, and by extension, utterly loyal to him. They would be ideal subjects for his next round of magical experiments, and more importantly, for studying the true power of collective faith. As for the market and Paradise communities, they were outsiders, ex-convicts, exiles, troublemakers who'd never really belonged. Let Behemoth's invaders conscript them or wipe them out. Either outcome would clear the way for restoring order to Nathan Island. And once the enemy was driven off, any lingering questions about resources or daily life here would prove to be minor obstacles, easily solved under Lucian's rule. Yes, Your Majesty. The Nathanian guards bowed in perfect unison. They were free to offer ounsel, but once the king made his decision, it was carried out without question. Meanwhile, aboard the Behemoth Company's warships patrolling the waters off Nathan Island, Ron Keller ended his final call with a satisfied click. As Behemoth's operations chief and a member of its board of directors, he'd secured a promise from the president of the Ichthyosaurus Society. They would not interfere with Behemoth's plans on Nathan Island. Their only mission was to retrieve one islander, Mochizuki Satoru, and then depart at once. Likewise, Nadotong had agreed to stay out of the affair, committing only to evacuate any Chinese nationals who wished to leave with them. Chapter 572, Kneel and Talk. Gidi, a middle-aged man in wire-rimmed glasses, strolled up to Ron with a teasing smirk. "You're awfully generous," he said. "If you were in my shoes, you wouldn't so readily agree to their demands. You'd squeeze them for every last advantage first." Ron chuckled, leaning back in his chair. "Gide, you've got to understand, if we swallow Nashon Island whole and leave our rivals without a slice, they'll lose face. And as you know, these people live and die by their pride. This is our first time pulling off a deal of this scale. If it succeeds, our family's influence in the company will skyrocket, maybe even give us full control. Failure simply isn't an option. Handing them a few prized assets is a small price to pay. Once they've tasted these scraps, they'll be eating out of our hands." He tapped the security monitor mounted on the wall. The live feed showed island guards patrolling the perimeter, but their movements were slow and uncoordinated. "Besides," Ron added, "the Nashon Island security is a joke. As long as they stay out of our way, this operation is as good as done." Gide nodded, eyes gleaming with excitement. "The God Tree research is the real prize. Everything else is just leverage." Ron's grin widened. "Exactly. Once we control the God Tree, the rest of the world will have no choice but to kneel and talk." Ron scanned the island through the viewport and gave the order: "Deploy the dumpling dropcraft. Take Lucian's team ashore. Execute the plan and neutralize every trace of resistance." At his command, the dumplings, stout, heavily armored insertion vessels, splashed down along the island's rocky shore. Out poured squads of genetic special ops soldiers, each clad in sleek, form-fitting combat suits and bristling with experimental weaponry. They fanned out instantly, securing beachheads on all sides. Their objective was clear: sweep the perimeter, subdue any hostile forces, local militias or foreign interlopers, and then press in toward the palace at the island's heart to seize the legendary God Tree. Overhead, hundreds of armed helicopters roared into position. Their underbelly pylons carried an array of deadly payloads: surface-to-air and anti-armor missiles, high-explosive rockets, twin heavy-barrel Gatling guns, and sniper teams whose eyes had been surgically enhanced to identify targets at incredible range. Their mission was to hunt down the island's so-called true masters, whoever or whatever they might be. Not far off, beyond the ragged line of coral reefs, Behemoth's warships held station. From their decks, swarms of compact combat drones launched in uncountable waves, instantly turning the sky into a tangled net of buzzing rotors. Within moments, the entire island was sealed off, every inch under surveillance. A crackling broadcast cut through the din. "All inhabitants of Nathan Island, this is your final warning. If you understand Mandarin, Report immediately to the emergency assembly point at coordinates 27.347°, 84.562 northeast of the palace grounds. Failure to comply will be interpreted as hostile activity. Silence fell for a heartbeat. Then the assault began in earnest. Every speaker and holoscreen on the island sprang to life as the drone fleet activated its broadcast. No matter where you hide, we will find you. All past sins will be forgiven. You will be granted a new identity and secure employment. Join us and start over. The message rolled over rocky coves and ramshackle settlements, reaching the ears of every criminal, deserter, and outcast hiding on this remote stronghold, some branded for war crimes, others condemned only by their ancestry. The promise of a clean slate was impossible to ignore. Lieutenant Lucian's fingers froze above the console the moment the drones appeared on his radar. He spun in his chair to face Commander Ron, who had just entered the operations room. "Sir, they're everywhere. North, south, east, and they're broadcasting that offer." Ron's jaw tightened. "Patch me through to the operations chief." A crackling voice came over the secure line. "Commander, this is Omega-5. We've confirmed a swarm of over 500 drones delivering a mass recruitment pitch, full amnesty, new identities, guaranteed livelihoods. They've explicitly stated they won't engage our forces, provided we stay out of their way." Ron ran a hand through his hair. "And who exactly are they?" "They refuse to identify themselves," the officer replied coolly. "They say they only want volunteers." Ron tapped the rim of his console with mounting frustration. "They're preying on every fugitive and rebel on this island. Fine. Lucian, track their flight paths and signal patterns. I want every broadcast logged and analyzed. If they even hint at violence, I want to know immediately." "Understood, sir," Lucian answered, pulling up multiple sensor feeds. Outside, the drone's promise faded from the airwaves, leaving only the steady hum of their rotors. In the dimly lit command center, Ron and Lucian exchanged a guarded look. The island's underworld had a choice: accept the anonymous savior's offer of redemption, or discover exactly what happened to those who dared to refuse. "Set up those big speakers over there and start broadcasting," Huang Boren said with an easy smile. "Even if they refuse to listen, at least it won't slow us down. Agreed?" Ron hesitated. Huang Boren's tone was so cordial that he found himself without a proper reply. Clearing his throat, he issued a warning. "Once the notice goes out, you'd better pull back. No excuses." "No problem at all," Huang Boren assured him. "We'll stand down at once and won't interfere with your mission. If any stragglers hang around, feel free to deal with them on the spot." He grinned, utterly cooperative. "Words are an art," he added. "You don't always need force. After all, she's only a little girl. Let me handle negotiations with her. Convince her to bring that god tree under our control." Just then, a young man with sun-bleached hair strode up to Ron, ruffling his locks and flashing a cocky grin. Ron frowned. "Jarrett, King Nashon won't be so easy to sway. If he'd been open to talks, he'd have agreed by now. They won't bend under these circumstances." Jarrett's smile only widened. Without another word, he climbed into the waiting helicopter and headed straight for the palace. Lucian leaned forward as the drone's report crackled through his earpiece, a slow smile spreading across his face. "All islanders have been safely withdrawn to the palace hall," Li Mumu announced from the communications console. "They're ready to join the fight at a moment's notice." Lucian nodded, waved a hand, and settled back onto the throne, his eyes fixed on the distant speck of an approaching helicopter. "Very well," he said coolly. "Let's enjoy the show." The chopper bearing Bahimos's insignia touched down on the palace courtyard with a low thump. The side door slid open, and Jarrett strode out, flanked by two genetically enhanced soldiers clutching high-powered rifles. At first he froze. Lucian sat imperiously on the throne, Li Mumu standing alert at his side, but he recovered instantly. With a slight bow, Jarrett announced, "Your Majesty, I am Jarrett. It is an honor to stand before the King of Nason. I bring important matters for your consideration." His words rang courteous enough, but his confident stride up the marble steps betrayed a man accustomed to commanding, not submitting. Chapter 12. The Unforeseen Monarch. Lucian sat quietly on the obsidian throne, his posture composed, almost languid, until he subtly lowered his hand. In an instant, Jarrett and the two royal guards who just ascended the stairway froze, their knees buckling as if some invisible weight pressed down upon them. Jarrett's voice quavered. "My lord, you wish us to?" Lucian's eyes flicked over them, expression icily amused. "Since you came to petition me," he said, "you might as well speak from your knees." Back on the warship Dauntless, Commander Ron stared at the holoscreen in disbelief. There, perched on the throne, was not the frail child they knew as King Nathan, but a tall, dark-haired man radiating authority, and by his side, the genuine Nathan, clutching a silver-tipped staff, dared not move. "Who is this?" Ron whispered. "Weren't we supposed to be negotiating with the Queen? The little girl's name was Nathan." Lieutenant Hale adjusted his glasses and leaned closer to the display. I think I know him," he said. "Out in the Eastern Quadrant's alien circles, there's been a buzz about someone called the Golden Warden, Jinbao in the old dialect. They say he's invincible in combat, and now it seems he's allied himself with Nathan and somehow claimed the throne." Ron ran a hand through his hair. So Jarrett's mission collapsed the moment he stepped ashore. This isn't the Child King we prepared for. It's a warlord we barely even have on file. A low murmur ran through the bridge crew. The Dauntless had expected a tense but winnable parley with a young monarch. Instead, they faced Lucian, Jinbao, the new ruler of Nathan, whose mere gesture could topple soldiers, and as long as he occupied that throne, the warship's orders would mean nothing. Below, Jarrett cleared his throat, voice strained. "Your Majesty, I request terms." Lucian's smile widened, but his eyes never left Ron's ship hovering at Nathan's cliffs. "Terms," he echoed softly. "Very well. Begin by laying down your arms." He raised a single finger, an unspoken command that made Jarrett flinch. Above them, the Dauntless hummed in orbit, its crew realizing at last that their greatest intelligence failure wasn't missing plans or troop dispositions. It was failing to recognize the very man who now reigned over Nathan Island. And Lucian, the Golden Warden, had only just begun to make his will felt. "Even if you're the strongest in the world, you'll hand me that plate, deliver it to our primary objective, and claim it alongside King Nathan himself." A flicker of contempt crossed Ron's features. No matter how formidable his opponent might be, their power was finite, and it would never stand in the way of Ron's plans. Chapter 573, Spreading Prosperity and Civilization in the Pigpen, Second Update. Lucian leaned back in his throne-like chair, watching General Jarrett struggle vainly against the chamber's intensified gravity. The artificial pull forced Jarrett's body flat against the floor. He could barely lift his head. "King Nathan," Jarrett gasped, voice cracking, "this isn't how you welcome." "We don't welcome you here at all," Lucian interrupted, voice low and even. "Gather your men and leave Nathan Island." A cold gleam flickered in the eyes of Commander Limumu, who stood beside Lucian. "You heard His Majesty," Limumu said, stepping forward. "Depart at once." Jarrett forced a crooked smile. "Your Majesty, you must remember the old custom. Whenever the throne changes hands, foreigners may set foot on the island. It's thanks to that tradition that this previously hostile zone became accessible." Lucian's grin grew sharper. "The throne has indeed changed hands. I am the new king. Surely you see that by now?" For a moment, Jarrett was speechless. Then he bowed his head in a show of submission. "Your Majesty, King Nathan, you've misunderstood our purpose. We came to bring Nathan Island prosperity and civilization, for your own good. We will help you govern more effectively, but you will remain the exalted King Nathan." Lucian's lips curved into a faint, mocking smile. "Prosperity and civilization, you say? I'm eager to hear more." Lucian allowed himself a small, mocking smile. "Go on, spread it to your heart's content." With a crisp wave of his hand and a precise incantation, he unleashed his enhanced transformation spell. Jarrett and the two genetic soldiers were caught squarely in its path. In an instant, the three men shrank and twisted until, with a startled squeal, they became three little white pigs. Normally, a polymorph spell severs the victim's mind and replaces it with the animal's instincts, but Lucian's improved version was crueler. It left the victim's human consciousness intact. As piglets, Jarrett and the others still knew exactly what they were, and realized immediately how ridiculous they looked in front of the helicopter's ramp. Fearing further magic, they scampered toward the chopper, convinced the company's medics could somehow restore them once they were back on board. Lucian's grin widened. "Take them to the pigsty. Let them go forth and spread prosperity and civilization. With a snap of his fingers, the squealing piglets were scooped up by several Nathan guards standing by. They flailed and grunted in panic, but no amount of scrambling could free them from human grasp. As the guards carried their 3 new ambassadors away, Lucian turned his attention back to the mission at hand, confident that nothing would stand in his way now. Limumu sneered as he addressed the young king. "Your Majesty, white pigs like these aren't kept in the palace. There are wild boars out here, but they're notoriously savage. Those 3 won't last long among them." Lucian merely smiled. "Perfect," he said. "Our pigs bring prosperity and order wherever they go. Let's see if they can civilize a few boars, and perhaps produce a few more piglets in the process." The 3 transformed white pigs, once human, now creatures of Lucian's making, heard the exchange and thrashed furiously against their bonds. But Nathan's guards were unmoved. With anguished squeals, the animals were hauled away, their struggles growing fainter by the second. Limumu shook his head in mock sympathy. "Our new king is either brilliant or mad," he muttered. "Either way, he's wasting time." Far offshore, the behemoth warship plowed through the waves. In the command center, Ron studied the live helicopter feed, then keyed his communicator. "All units on the island, execute Phase 1 of the operation," he ordered. "Capture your targets alive. Use only low-velocity rounds or tranquilizer darts. Understood?" Thus began the 3-stage assault. First, secure live prisoners. Next, neutralize any remaining resistance. Finally, establish complete control. And with Ron's command crackling through every radio, the island fell into chaos. Phase 2 orders were clear. Any alien who resists stubbornly or proves too powerful to capture alive is to be neutralized on the spot with our highest caliber special rounds. Recover their bodies at all costs. Phase 3. Encircle the palace with maximum force and bring down the sacred tree. No mercy. Every obstacle must be eliminated, and the sacred tree is our top priority. In the warship's command center, updates crackled relentlessly over the comm link. Report, no islanders detected, no ambushes encountered. Report, we've secured the entire marketplace community. Report, entry into Paradise complete. Report, Paradise is mounting fierce resistance, requesting special reinforcements. Commander Ron absorbed each dispatch, rapidly refining the battle plan and issuing fresh orders. Hyena Team, Explosive Unit, and the Hunting Squad move in to reinforce Sector 7. Launch 10 armed helicopters immediately. Your objective is to capture the high-value targets alive and extract Sean without casualties. Military strategist Ged studied the data streams, his expression puzzled. Everything was unfolding too smoothly. "What about the local islanders and Nathan's guards on the shore?" he asked. "No hit teams, no snares. Have they all fallen back to the palace?" Lucian leaned over the rough-hewn table, studying the smudged ink lines of the palace's blueprints. Flickering torchlight cast dancing shadows across the room, but the tension between him, Ron, and Ged was all too real. "This is beyond bold," Lucian said, tapping a finger on the map. "Our new king has gathered every Nathan Guardian and every islander he trusts inside the palace walls. He's daring us to attack head-on." Ron shrugged, a confident grin tugging at his lips. "If he wants a decisive battle, let him have it. Luring them into a single fortress lets us bring our firearms to bear with maximum effect. We'll cut through their defenses faster and keep civilian casualties to a minimum." Ged frowned. "Just remember why we're here in the first place. We cannot and will not risk damaging the sacred tree. Its roots stretch under the northern ramparts. One stray shot and the entire isle suffers." Ron waved off the concern. "No need for panic. We'll use precision ordnance. No blast charges, no reckless cannonballs. The king wouldn't endanger the tree any more than we would. That's why he's placed his stand at the main gate, as far from the tree's canopy as possible. It's a death trap for attackers. Narrow approach, high walls, defensible on 3 sides." He tapped a corridor leading from the servants' quarters to an inner courtyard. "But don't forget, we have an insider. He'll open a side door at the south wing, and right here." Ron traced his finger confidently. "We slip in, strike at the gate's defenders from within, and turn their own defenses against them." Lucian met Ged's gaze. "All right, we press at dusk. Quick in, quick out. No stray shots, no surprises. Are you ready?" They nodded in unison. Outside, the wind rustled through the priceless leaves of the sacred tree. Inside, 3 conspirators sealed their pact and prepared to write history. Lucian owed his command of the operation to one thing above all: money. He'd invested a small fortune and every ounce of his ingenuity to win over Elijah, the Nathan Guardian in charge of Nathan Island's diplomacy. It was Elijah's sabotage of the Golden Branch and the ensuing royal succession crisis that created the opening Lucian needed. Through Elijah, they'd secured every scrap of intelligence on Nathan Island, the strengths and weaknesses of each Nathan guard, detailed blueprints of the palace, guard rotations, even secret passageways. For each powerful sentinel, Lucian's team had devised a countermeasure. As long as no outside force intervened, failure simply wasn't an option. "That's our green light," Gad said, exhaling at last. Ron nodded. "Paradise has been secured, the inverted are detained and en route back, and Sean is safe. Mission complete." Half an hour later, another transmission arrived, bringing even better news. Ron and Gad exchanged relieved smiles. Neutralizing the inverted and their stronghold, the so-called Paradise, had been one of their toughest challenges. But executed according to plan, it had gone off without a hitch, and now, victory at last seemed firmly within their grasp. "Attention all units. Reload, rearm, and converge on the palace entrance." Ron's voice crackled over the comms. Turning to Gad, he added with a grin, "This sector's yours. I'm flying in to personally command the assault on the palace and secure the sacred tree." "Stay safe," Gad replied shortly as Ron climbed aboard the waiting helicopter. They'd been friends and business partners for years, each invested in the company's fate and the mission's success. Now, on Nathan Island, every regiment had the same orders: tighten the noose around the palace from every direction. At the same time, specialist teams who'd slipped ashore under cover of night fell in behind the main forces, making their way to the grand entrance. Their plan was chillingly uniform: quietly neutralize a small squad of genetic warriors, steal their uniforms, and infiltrate the palace ranks. How each group avoided scrutiny was left to their own skill and cunning. "Holy shit! Isn't that Mr. Jin?" Zhang Chulan hissed, tugging at the sleeve of his behemoth marine jacket. "And why the hell is he posing as King Nathan?" Next to him, Feng Baobao and the rest of their ragtag crew melted into the milling crowd, hearts pounding as they prepared to see the plan through. He looked up, and there was Lucian, seated on the throne and blinking down at him. The sudden sight sent a jolt of shock through his chest. Chapter 574, The New King Who Shakes the World, Update 1. "Looks like we've got ourselves another spectacle," Xiao Zizai remarked from his spot beside Zhang Chulan. "No need for sabotage anymore." He nodded toward the dais where Lucian sat upon the throne. Memories of the massive pit Lucian had gouged that day still sent shivers down his spine. If Behemoth intended to seize the sacred tree that Jin Baobao protected, forcing their way through would be no small feat. Can he really be that powerful? Xiao Zizai wondered aloud. Old Meng snorted. "We'll find out soon enough, and if he doesn't hold them off, then perhaps it'll fall to us to intervene." Across the chamber, Wang Zhengqiu smiled under his breath. From the moment he'd set foot in Bu village, he'd quietly gathered every scrap of information he could on Lucian. What he'd discovered was unusual. Lucian's aura, his sudden rise, it defied every precedent. He wasn't alone in that opinion. Masters contracted by the Jade Society, the notorious 7 deadly sins, even the most fearsome debt collectors in the land, all sensed a fundamental shift in King Nathan's presence. Few knew the full truth behind Lucian's identity, but everyone agreed on one thing: the boy on the throne was anything but ordinary. "And here we sit," Wang Zhengqiu murmured, eyes fixed on Lucian, waiting to see whether this new king will crumble or stand strong enough to make the world tremble. Not long after Behemoth's forces completed their ring of steel around the palace, a sleek, black helicopter descended from the evening sky and touched down behind the main gate. Lucian, the company's managing director, stepped off first, his posture calm and confident. Immediately at his side appeared Hyena and Explosive Man, Behemoth's 2 deadliest operatives, their eyes sweeping the courtyard for any threat. King Nathan and his elite teleporting guards might have the power to vanish in an instant, but Lucian was just a human, and one wrong move could turn this standoff into a massacre. Inside Behemoth, 2 factions pulled in opposite directions. In the open stood the noble division, led by the celebrated hero Sean. Recruited through official channels and driven by an unshakable sense of justice, Sean's team battled criminals and alien insurgents under the company's shining logo, unaware of what lay behind Behemoth's closed doors. Their successes earned glowing public praise, and strict internal rules kept them from straying into illicit territory. Yet in the shadows lurked the true power brokers, Hyena, Explosive Man, and their secret network of operatives entrusted with Behemoth's darkest missions. Sean's arrival on Nason Island had been a fortunate accident, a chance encounter that threatened to expose the gulf between Behemoth's public face and its hidden agenda. Most of the hyena-like creatures and the so-called bombers had once been either convicted criminals or experimental subjects for the company. They'd already crushed every captive force the evil organization could muster. Morally bankrupt, they specialized in the company's dirtiest work. This time their orders were to seize Nason Island, desecrate its sacred tree, and slaughter the islanders. If Sean's team had arrived first, they would have refused to stand by, and likely would have fought these mercenaries on sight. But these alien soldiers answered to no one. To ensure absolute obedience, Behemoth implanted microscopic bombs in their brains. At a moment's notice, the company could end their lives, or force them into any mission, no questions asked. The helicopter blades kicked up dust as it settled on the beach. Ron climbed down, megaphone in hand, but he stopped the instant his boots hit the sand. He took shelter behind his personal guard of hyenas and bombers. Unlike Jarrett, he'd learned not to rush in blind. Raising the megaphone, he cleared his throat. "New king of Nason Island," his voice echoed across the clearing. "I know you're powerful, but look around. You can't win this. Don't die for nothing. Cooperate with us, and I promise prosperity for you and your people." He waited, letting those words hang in the scorching air, giving Lucian one final chance to choose life over a hopeless battle. Lucian couldn't help but laugh when he heard Ron's taunt echoing up from below. "What are you talking about? Throwing your life away just because you've got a handful of trash and a few toys?" His words, amplified by spellcraft, rolled over the battlefield. "How arrogant!" murmured the soldiers gathered at Ron's command. Few of them knew Lucian's true prowess. To them, his scorn was an unforgivable insult. These were not children's playthings, but battlefield-hardened automatons, cold, lethal machines. The response was immediate. "Shoot him!" Ron ordered without hesitation. If he could break Lucian's hold on morale, if he could shatter the hope of freeing Jarrett, then claiming the sacred tree would cost them almost nothing. Above them, hundreds of attack helicopters loomed. In each cockpit, a sniper whose eyes had been magically enhanced tracked Lucian's every move. At Ron's command, one such marksman took careful aim through a high-powered scope and squeezed the trigger. The salvo unleashed was terrifying, hundreds of specially forged, armor-piercing rounds streaking out at supersonic speed, each capable of punching clean through an armored vehicle, even at 1,600 meters. Lucian stood alone in the clearing as hundreds of armor-piercing rounds tore through the air toward him. Even Diamond Man, the most defensively gifted hero of Behemoth, would have been shredded like paper by that hail of bullets. Yet, astonishingly, every single round came to an abrupt halt, a mere meter from Lucian's chest. Unfazed, Lucian summoned a steaming cup of green tea out of thin air. He brought it to his lips, took a deliberate sip, and set it down. His voice was calm, almost amused. "I said you were nothing but toys. You still didn't believe me." With a gentle exhale, he blew on the suspended bullets, and in an instant they reversed course. Now traveling at twice their original speed, they ripped back toward their sources. Bang, bang, bang! The sounds of rupturing metal and splintering rotors echoed from the helicopter hovering overhead. Below, alien observers with keen eyesight spotted dark splatters bloom across the cockpit's glass, proof of fatal headshots. "Report, report! The sniper's down!" crackled frantic voices through Ron's headset as pilots radioed in disbelief. "Activate Plan 3, Ron ordered. Eliminate all hostile targets across the area." Indeed, the new king of Nathan was not to be underestimated. Lucian hadn't merely stopped a barrage of armor-piercing bullets. He'd turned them into a precision strike that wiped out an entire sniper team without so much as breaking a sweat. Lucian studied the holoscreen for a beat, then spoke into his headset. If we don't finish them now, once the rear team breaks in, they'll be impossible to catch. And if he slips away, the debt collector gains another top-tier operative. He gave the order. In an instant, the armed helicopter's rockets, missiles, and turret guns opened up on King Nathan and his bodyguards. Hyena's voice crackled in his ear. "Lucian, don't forget, they can all teleport." He barely glanced at her. "I'm not worried. These guys are too stubborn to bail out just to save the palace." He was drawing on Elijah's intelligence. Nathan's guards were supposed to be scattered throughout the forest in blocking positions, each squad tagged with its own elimination plan. But that briefing had been issued before an unexpected twist. The old king's sudden death and the crowning of a new Nathan monarch had rendered their entire scheme outdated. King Nathan's forces fell into formation and pressed forward, reaching the palace gates without so much as a whisper of resistance. Lucian watched from the front lines, confident that no one inside would dare dodge their assault, certainly not now, and especially not Elijah. After all, Elijah had defected to their side. He wouldn't be foolish enough to teleport away, as the other guards had. "How could this be?" Lucian muttered under his breath. In the next heartbeat, every missile, rocket, and bullet in motion froze dead in midair, stalled just yards from Lucian and his men. Chapter 575, The Lamb to the Slaughter. Second update. Return. With a casual flick of his wrist, Lucian sent every missile, rocket, and bullet hurtling back toward their source. In an instant, the sky above the palace was filled with explosions as the enemy's armed helicopters, Behemoth Company's pride and joy, were torn apart in midair. Boom, boom, boom. Behemoth's most formidable air force disintegrated before the new king's eyes. Lucian's mastery of metal, an inheritance from the legendary Magneto, proved the ultimate counter to modern weaponry. Now, with his growing command of magic pushing him close to cosmic power, he could annihilate Behemoth with a mere gesture. After all, what advanced munition doesn't rely on metal in its design? A roar of cheers rose from the hall behind him. The Nathanese guards and islanders, once loyal to the sacred tree's divine mandate, watched in awe as their king single-handedly obliterated the threat overhead. Their faith in Lucian's divine right swelled to new heights. "Sir," Ron shouted over the jubilation, urgency in his voice. "He controls metal. No thermal weapons will only play into his hands." Lucian turned, the glow of victory reflecting in his eyes, as the palace erupted in renewed devotion. The legends of their metal-bending monarch had just begun. "Let the hunt team move in." Ron gaped at Lucian's display of power as Gad's voice crackled in his earpiece. Aboard the warship, Gad had tracked every moment through the surveillance network, immediately collaborating with the ship's analysts to piece together the truth. "Understood," Ron echoed. "Hyena and Blastman, Lucian's ability is metal manipulation. You're to capture him alive. His power is too valuable for study. The rest of you stand by to provide support." Relief and excitement lit up Ron's face. Only moments ago, over 100 armed helicopters lay in shattered wreckage, and the realization had hit him like a blow. The newcomer known as King Nathan was terrifyingly strong, capable of negating rockets and missiles with ease. Even a combined force might not bring him down. "If we can't stop King Nathan, we lose our chance at the sacred tree," Ron thought. "And failure here would doom my family's standing in the corporation." But Gad's orders gave him renewed hope. With Hyena and Blastman on the move, Ron believed they finally had a shot at capturing Lucian and securing their victory. Lucian glanced around the briefing room, his expression calm but firm. Alien powers vary widely. Sometimes they border on the unbelievable, but once you understand an ability, you can develop a countermeasure. Take the Nadatong Corporation's Phantom Hacker, for instance. It infiltrates secure networks as a digital consciousness, steals classified data, alters passwords, even redirects funds, and, at worst, can trigger a nuclear launch. Terrifying, right? But our hunters faced it with their own uploaded consciences, hunting that phantom through cyberspace until they captured it. That's the key. Adapt and meet every threat head-on. Just now, Nathan King's display of power looked unstoppable. In reality, it was his mastery of metal that made him so dangerous. He literally reshaped the battlefield, twisting enemy weapons into useless shards. If you avoid thermal arms, he's only a stronger than average alien, and we have plenty of specialists on our side who could take him down. so there's no reason to panic. Even better, if we can capture him alive, we can study his metal control ability. Imagine endowing our own agents with that gift. That would give us a tremendous edge against any future foe. Let's stay sharp. He paused, letting his words sink in. Around the table, the team exchanged determined looks. They knew the risks, but they also knew that, with the right preparations, nothing was truly unbeatable. Lucian sat atop the ancient stone throne at the heart of the sacred grove, calm and unyielding. Below him, the courtyard had frozen for a heartbeat, until Ron's voice rang out across the tumult. "It isn't a control meta, Lel," Ron boomed. "It was a ruse all along." At once, Hyena and Bakugo snapped out of their surprise, sneers replacing their shock. Hyena's muscles bulged, his strength-enhancing quirk second only to the hero Sean's, and in the blink of an eye he blurred forward, leaving a trail of afterimages as he bore down on Lucian. Bakugo surged right behind him, both palms ignited with volatile energy. "You can steer missiles, can't you?" Bakugo taunted, sprinting on the balls of his feet. "Let's see how you handle my explosions. They're just as deadly." Meanwhile, more than 20 strangers in sleek, form-fitting battlesuits circled above, each powered by a different quirk. With a collective whoosh, they split into assault vectors, ready to rain destruction on the grove. Farther down, a contingent of mercenaries, masquerading in stolen military uniforms, watched from the tree line. They hesitated. Behemoth's fear of using its thermal arsenal left them wondering, should they intervene to rescue Nathan? But any thought of mercy vanished as quickly as it came. Saving Nathan was never their mission. Their orders were clear: raze the sacred tree to ashes. With resolve stealing their hearts, they turned their backs on the chance of rescue. The grove would burn. Lucian watched in silence as the conspirators fussed over their next move. If they rushed in now to help slay Behemoth, King Nathan, the Guardian, and every islander would rise up to stop them from destroying the sacred tree. Better, they decided, to wait, see which way the wind would blow. And yet, even if Behemoth emerged victorious, their win would be hollow. Once the dragon was dealt with, the kingdom would be weakened, its forces scattered, and the tree could still be torn down by sheer force of arms. Conversely, if Behemoth fell first, the survivors would be too battered to mount a true defense. Either outcome left the sacred tree just as vulnerable as before. They were counting on fortune, but Lucian knew they'd miscalculated. There's an old proverb about the snipe and the clam. When they fight, the fisherman walks away rich. But that's when the contestants are small fry. When one of them is a dragon, the fisherman's fate depends entirely on the beast's mercy. If the dragon tires of its foes and turns on the bystander, there won't be riches, only death. A low, rumbling exhale shook the clearing. From the shadows loomed Behemoth, his scales catching the moonlight like shards of night. His great wings unfurled, blotting out the stars, and his voice rolled across the field like distant thunder. "A pack of chickens and curse," he growled. "Daring to conspire in my presence? How amusing." Lucian stood atop the throne's highest step and calmly handed his teacup to Li Mumu. Then, with a deliberate motion, he raised his hand and pointed forward. Almost immediately, a jagged black rune appeared in the sky, and an intolerable weight slammed down across the courtyard. From the snarling hyenas at the base of the steps to Bakugo and the alien hunters halfway up, from Ron and the genetically engineered soldiers below, to the undercover operatives masquerading as footmen, every single one was forced to their knees by a gravity they could not resist. The harder they fought, the more oppressive the force became. Lucian's lips curved into a faint smile. "Kneel before me." This was no ordinary spell. In the fairy tale world, he had learned basic gravity magic, but here he had merged and refined countless variants into a single, crushing incantation. Within its sphere of influence, every creature was bound by gravity proportional to its resistance. The more they struggled, the more relentlessly they were pressed to the ground. Unless their power exceeded his own, standing was impossible. Even the fiercest warriors and the most formidable beasts lay subdued. Li Mumu, ever watchful at his side, caught his eye and inclined her head. Lucian turned his attention back to the kneeling throng. With absolute control over their will, he was ready to extract the secrets he needed. The city, and its hid and conspiracies, would be his to command. Not even a hyena-class alien, renowned for raw strength, could resist the crushing force that pinned him to the ground. And yet Ron, an ordinary human, knelt just as hard. Under the same pressure, he should have been pulverized. "How is this possible?" Ron gasped, voice trembling. On the island shore, every soldier froze. Aboard the Behemoth-class warships offshore, Gad and the top researchers in alien abilities exchanged stunned looks. They had just witnessed Lucian redirect missiles and bullets, an ability they'd chalked up to metal manipulation. But this? Nothing they knew could explain an invisible gravity field draping them all like an iron blanket. Hundreds of trained warriors, some of the galaxy's strongest, were rendered helpless. If Lucian chose to kill them, they wouldn't even be able to scream. Lucian lifted his gaze. A slow, satisfied smile played across his lips as he took in the island, then shifted his eyes to the looming behemoths where Gad stood, pale and alarmed. He wove his power again, and the air itself seemed to grow heavier. "By the way," Lucian said, his voice carrying clear across the field, "I see you've got a few reinforcements waiting offshore. Why not bring them in? They can kneel with everyone else." Another pulse rippled outward, and every man and alien, no matter how powerful, bent under the weight of Lucian's command. The battlefield fell eerily silent, the only sound the soft scrape of armor against sand as the Invincible knelt before him. Chapter 576, Shooting for the Stars with a Warship in Hand. There's No One Like Me, Part 1. What's going on? What's wrong with our warship? Outside the island's protective barrier, every vessel bearing the Behemoth insignia began to shudder as Lucian's power took hold. One by one, they lifted from the waves and hovered in midair. "This is impossible. How can his ability be so overwhelming?" cried Admiral Ged. He dashed out of the conference chamber, sprinted across the deck, and peered over the railing. His own flagship, along with every other Behemoth cruiser, was ascending as if drawn by an invisible magnet toward the island's central palace. Closer at hand, the armadas of Nadutong, Yulonghui, and the debt collectors remained locked to the sea, their ships unaffected. Inside each warship, commanders stared in disbelief at the sudden aerial advance of the Behemoth fleet. At that moment, Admiral Ged's console chimed with a private notification, a live uplink from Nadutong's shadow operative, the Phantom, Erzhuang. He had already infiltrated Behemoth's entire network, using every sensor and instrument aboard the Gene Warrior vessels as his eyes and ears. To rally the major powers against Behemoth, Erzhuang had formed an unprecedented intelligence alliance, pooling real-time data from all involved factions. And now, under Lucian's command, those once rusted hulls were flying straight for the heart of the island. All the great powers had seen it happen right in front of the palace. Behemoth's warships, each displacing between 20,000 and 30,000 tons, and the largest tipping the scales at nearly 50,000 tons, had been drawn to the island's center by the uncanny power of the new Nazan king, Lucian. In total, over a dozen vessels, some 500,000 to 600,000 tons of metal, had simply lifted off the ground and hovered at his command. It was a horrifying spectacle. If Lucian had chosen to raise those warships high above the city and drop them, the death toll would have been beyond reckoning. No one in this world, alien or human, could survive such an onslaught. Now every nation and faction was forced to revise its evaluation of the new Nazan king. Even stripped of his Nazan guards and the island's defenders, Lucian alone could not be opposed. How could anyone resist when more than a dozen warships could be made to fly as easily as a flock of birds? In the face of that power, tanks, artillery, fighter jets, and indeed every modern weapon on Earth would be rendered utterly useless. Even the most devastating nuclear arsenal counted for nothing. Every missile the invaders fired was instantly hurled right back at them. It wasn't just metal manipulation. They wielded a gravity-bending magic so powerful that the galaxy's fiercest warriors simply dropped to their knees, unable to rise. Any hope of slipping in an assassination vanished in an instant. "Damn it! Damn it all!" the stunned aliens muttered as their warships began to crash. Standing before the palace gates, Zhang Chulan watched in astonishment as a dozen Behemoth-class dreadnoughts tumbled from the sky like wounded beasts. He could barely contain himself. "Lucian is incredible! Lucian is incredible! Lucian is incredible!" In truth, when the massive magic circle flared to life, Zhang Chulan, Feng Baobao, and the other envoys were perfectly safe. Lucian had cast a special ward around them. But to keep their protection a secret, Zhang Chulan feigned weakness, dropping to one knee with the countless warriors around him. He could only blame his lack of sophistication. When words failed him, all he managed was a single rueful curse. Damn. Yet beneath that lone expletive lay a heart full of gratitude and relief. Lucian's power had just turned the tide of the entire conflict. Thousands of words could express my feelings, but this one's the most elegant, Feng Baobao joked in her thick Sichuan accent, still sprawled on the ground with her backside in the air. She parodied Zhang Chulan and Wang Zhenchu's string of expletives, crafting them into a mock poem. Oh, fuck. Oh, 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 oh. The instant she finished, Zhang Chulan let out a booming curse that cracked in his throat. He'd been whispering before, terrified of drawing attention, but now, with everyone around equally stunned, he no longer cared. On sweaty knees and with bowed heads, the entire courtyard was alive with muffled oaths and gasps. No one paused to wonder why the soldier next to them was swearing in a different dialect. Their eyes flicked from the massive warship hovering above the palace to Lucian himself. Every face registered the same mixture of awe and terror, some uttering, "Oh my God," others simply, "Fuck," until every head was tipped skyward. The ironclad warship had careened over the palace walls and come to a sudden halt in midair. Then, from the throne room below, King Jinison rose with deliberate grace. He stepped into the air, and in a heartbeat his figure swelled outward, growing enormous until his very presence filled the courtyard like a gathering storm. Lucian's form swelled in an instant, growing into a towering behemoth tens of thousands of meters tall. With a single, effortless motion, he snatched up the nearest warship, aimed it toward the sun, and hurled it into the sky. Before that vessel had even cleared the atmosphere, he'd grabbed another, and then another, flinging each one into space like toys on a playground. "Off to the stars with my fleet in hand. There's no one like me in the universe," he bellowed, watching a dozen warships shrink to black specks against the bright sky. Satisfied, Lucian reverted to his normal size and settled back onto his throne. Judging by the raw strength of his toss and the enhancement of his magic abilities, each ship would easily match, or even outpace, Earth's rocket launchers on their way out. Whether those vessels remained intact or their crews survived was of no concern to him. His sole aim had been to stun Behemoth and send a clear message to every power in the world. This was what true strength looked like. Lucian reclined on his ebony throne, the torchlight flickering against the vaulted stone walls of the throne room. He fixed Ron with a cold, unreadable gaze. "Tell me again," he said softly, "why have you come here?" With a casual flick of his wrist, Lucian dispelled the gravity enchantment that had pinned Ron face first to the floor. Freed, Ron's legs gave way beneath him, and he collapsed to his knees, his face slick with sweat. The old tales were true. King Nishan was as merciless as they said. He could already imagine Gade and the foreign merchants, if they dared defy Lucian, lying dead in some forgotten courtyard. And if he failed now, Ron's heart pounded with dread at the thought of sharing their fate. "Your Majesty," Ron stammered, forcing his hands into a pleading clasp, "all of this mishap is our fault. I was reckless, deceitful, utterly shameless. I beg your forgiveness. Once we return, I swear my company will compensate you beyond measure. From this day forward, every resource of Neshan Island will be yours, completely free of charge." He managed a trembling, insincere smile. For a moment, Lucian's expression softened into something like amusement. Then the king rose, his cloak whispering against the marble steps as he descended the dais, each footstep a promise of judgment. The silent hall seemed to hold its breath, waiting for what would come next. Lucian strode past the frozen fighters, eyes wide with terror. They didn't dare so much as twitch. "I'm no savior," he said, his voice cold, "and you're not worth forgiving." He stopped in front of Ron, raised his hand to his forehead, and unleashed his green mantra. In an instant, Ron dissolved into a wisp of emerald smoke and vanished into the air. Turning back to the others, Lucian's gaze swept across the island. "You have 30 minutes to get off this place. Swim, fly, crawl, however you go, just be gone. If any of you are still here when the time's up, you'll end up just like him." Chapter 577. This is what a king should look like. Yes! The hyena guard at the top of the steps spun on his heel and sprinted off the island, vanishing before anyone could shout a warning. King Nathan's newfound power was simply terrifying. No one dared challenge him. Ron lay dead at the king's feet, the explosive device in his skull rendered useless by Nathan's gallows. Better to use this moment to sever ties with Behemoth once and for all. With his strength, dozens of factions would eagerly recruit him. Why stay bound to a doomed cause? Seeing their strongest comrade flee, the rest of Behemoth's forces scattered in panic. Soldiers broke rank and raced toward the shore, while alien operatives disguised in human uniforms abandoned their posts and joined the exodus. The mission to destroy the sacred tree was over. They'd suffered crippling losses and failed to seize it. Yet in an ironic twist, the failure achieved the mission's true intent. By denying Behemoth access to the tree's power, they had prevented far greater danger. As the last boats pulled away from the island, the shoreline lay silent beneath the vast canopy of the sacred tree. Though untouched, its fate, and that of everyone who would come seeking its power, remained uncertain. Lucian stood on the wind-blasted shore, flanked by Zhang Chulan and the rest of his companions. All of them shared the same grim thought. If they didn't leave immediately, they could be mistaken for Behemoth's men and executed by Nathan's new king. It was absurd, but dangers often wore absurd disguises. Even though Lucian had quietly vowed to spare Zhang Chulan and their friends whenever possible, now was no moment for courtesy. With Nathan's warships from Nadatong waiting offshore, everyone was already turning toward the boats when a shimmering sigil blazed at their feet and vanished just as quickly. "Your Majesty, I beg you, let me join Nathan Island. Make me one of the Nathan Guardians." It was White, once proud master of black magic, striding forward from the assembled soldiers of Behemoth's old guard. On seeing the others break to flight, he dropped to one knee before Lucian, eyes shining with fervor. White had spent years studying forbidden arts, convinced that ordinary people, those without magic, were inferior beings. Wizards, he believed, should lead and govern the powerless, not mingle with them. But his world collapsed when his friend Tabor and a squad of unenchanted soldiers, wielding nothing more mystical than firearms, shattered his fortress with sheer firepower. Defeated and humiliated, White had found no reason left to go on, until now. Lucian's gaze was cool. He'd witnessed White's downfall and rebirth. This moment would test whether the once arrogant sorcerer had truly renounced his old contempt or simply craved power under a new banner. "Speak clearly," Lucian said, voice steady against the wind. "Why should I trust you?" White bowed his head lower, palms pressed together in earnest. "Because if I return to the black arts, your enemies will tremble. If I serve Nathan Island, I can destroy those who threaten us. I have nothing left but loyalty to you, King." A hush fell over the retreating crowd. Zhang Chulan exchanged a glance with Lucian. Every departure risked a betrayal, every new ally a hidden danger, yet the rescuing warships would not wait. Lucian inhaled the salt-thick air, weighed White's desperation. Then, at last, he straightened. "Very well," he announced. "Rise, White, and swear your fealty to Nathan Island. Once you prove yourself, you'll earn the title of Guardian." As White stood, relief and triumph flickered across his face. Meanwhile, the others whooped and hurried down the beach toward the waiting boats. Lucian watched them go and wondered if this strange new chapter would summon salvation or ruin. Lucian stood at the edge of Nathan Island's sacred clearing, his eyes fixed on the throne room where King Nathan held court. He'd seen armies massed on every continent, regiments of infantry, columns of tanks, squadrons of AT helicopters and warships bristling with missiles. Yet none of it had shaken him the way the king's presence did. In the face of such absolute power, every machine and weapon humanity could muster felt like a child's toy. Here on Nathan Island, there were no ordinary mortals. Every islander was born imbued with a unique ability, just as Lucian had always believed possible. Overcome by conviction, he stepped forward and knelt before King Nathan, pledging his unwavering loyalty. "I accept your strength as my guiding ideal," he vowed. "Let me serve you with all my heart." A deep, resonant voice answered, "I feel the truth of your spirit, Lucian. You shall be the 10th Nazan Guard." Without hesitation, Lucian turned to his trusted companion, White, and pressed his palm against White's forehead. A gentle pulse of light passed from Lucian into White, power drawn from the sacred tree itself, and in an instant, White's essence aligned with the island's defensive order. He rose, eyes glowing with purpose, the island's newest protector. Tradition held that Nasan Island could sustain only 9 guardians. Beyond that, the sacred tree's life force would falter. But Lucian's own power now flowed above and beyond the tree. If he wished, he could empower 1,000 guards with equal ease. And with White, undeniably one of the world's greatest martial talents, standing watch, any threat to Nasan Island could be subdued long after Lucian withdrew into meditation. Thus, with the 10th guard proclaimed and the island's safety assured, Lucian finally allowed himself a rare smile. His allegiance was sealed. Nasan Island, its king, and its people would be his life's purpose from this day forward. Lucian didn't kill White on the spot. Instead, he wanted him to see how he handled a searing hot weapon in battle. "Let's head back to the hall," Lucian said coolly. "We still have a few friends to meet." With that, Lucian sealed White into a Nasanvi and vanished in a flash, teleporting straight back to the palace's great hall. White and the other Nasanvis were left standing in stunned silence, their minds racing with shock, disbelief, and grudging admiration. One by one, they shook themselves free of the moment, and then, one by one, they teleported back to the hall to join him. "This is what a king should be," thought Li Mumu as she reappeared beside her grandfather, Li Muxuan. She remembered all too well her own reign as Queen of Nasan, how desperately she had tried to rally allies against Behemoth, only to be rebuffed at every turn. She had thrown herself into the fight with nothing but the sacred tree's fragile magic and a willingness to die for her people. Yet here stood Lucian, King of Nasan, needing neither divine intervention nor outside help. By his own strength alone, he had repelled every invader, secured Nasan Island, and, most importantly, protected the sacred tree they all depended on. In Feng Baobao's vision, the King of Nasan wasn't someone who needed a legion of Nasan guards or every islander ready to die for him. The throne belonged only to those truly capable of defending Nasan Island and its people. "Zhang Chulan, long time no see, how have you been?" Lucian materialized on the palace throne, waving at a still surprised Zhang Chulan. The moment Zhang saw him, his confusion melted into a broad grin. "Brother Lucian, it's been ages. Thanks to you, I couldn't be better." And it was true. Since learning about Feng Baobao's experiences, Zhang Chulan no longer felt compelled to chase the secrets of the 36 thieves or master the 8 strange techniques. He was content overseeing his own district's company affairs, mediating disputes among small alien factions, and apprehending any Karami who broke the law. Most of the time, he didn't even have to lift a finger. One order from him, and Sister Bauer carried it out perfectly. Team leads Shu San and Shu Si were still in command, and the pay was more than decent. Whenever Lucian had a spare moment, he pushed himself to train and get stronger. Even though this time he'd been teamed up the temporary operatives from across the regions, the assignment on Nasan Island wasn't especially perilous. Their orders were simple: assess the situation on the island, strike at Behemoth if the opportunity presented itself, and pull out immediately if it didn't. Warships loitered just offshore, ready for extraction, with Zhuge Qing, newly recruited into the company, and the aliens from Bio Village standing by on deck to lend support at a moment's notice. Earlier that morning, Lucian had been summoned by his mysterious superior, Jin. Standing amid the hum of the staging area, Jin had looked him in the eye and said, "You're capable and perceptive. You know why I've kept you by my side." Lucian had returned his gaze coolly and allowed himself a small smile. With his intelligence and resourcefulness, he wasn't the sort to be left in the lurch. From nearby, Zhang Chulan watched the exchange, his expression unreadable. After a moment's pause, Chulan tilted his head and asked, "Brother Jin, are you actually going to cooperate with the company on this operation?" Jin didn't answer outright. Instead, he motioned towards several of the temp operatives milling around the landing crafts. By assigning them to Lucian's team instead of sending him in alone, Jin had spoken volumes. He trusted Lucian, but he wasn't about to send him in blind. "I'd heard about Nasan Island and came to see it for myself, but I never expected to be accidentally crowned its new king. Now that I am, I'll have to give the island its due, and perhaps secure a few advantages for my country in the process." Lucian waved his hand. Instantly, a neat row of chairs appeared before Zhang Chulan and the others, each set with steaming tea and delicate pastries. "Please, sit down and help yourselves while we talk." "You've already become king of Nason before you even realized it?" Zhang Chulan muttered, flashing a wry smile as he settled into his seat. The others followed suit, everyone except Feng Baobao, who calmly tucked into the treats as though nothing unusual were happening. The remaining four, however, sat rigidly upright, still wary after Lucian's unexpected display and careful not to do anything that might earn the new king's displeasure.